5, 4, 3.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. Woo! I am your host, as always, ObjectivelyDan, and joining me today, it's a twofer. Buy one, get one free. We got Rachel Oates and Rationality Rules, aka Stephen Woodford, in the studio. How is it going, guys?
Not bad. I'm a little nervous, I'll be honest.
Oh, come on. It's going to be a great show. I mean, this is the British invasion. Mm-hmm. It's happening again in 2019. I am sad because you guys, well, actually, Rachel wasn't, but Stephen was, and a bunch of other people were on the last episode of Atheist Experience and Talk Heathen that I did not get to be a part of because I had to go drop my girlfriend off at the airport after Faithless Forum, but I'm so glad you guys got to do it.
She's worth it, okay?
Yes, she is worth it. No hate against that. But I'm glad that we got to do this now. We just hung out at Faithless Forum.
Oh, amazing. So fun.
That was the best thing ever. What did you guys think? I mean, I went there last year, but this was both of you guys' first time.
Yeah.
What did you guys think about that?
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do. It was the first time I've ever done anything like this.
That was like your first conference thing ever, right? Yeah.
Never mind speaking at it, just like going to one. It was my first one, and it was amazing and intense and inspiring. And sorry,
you're
is
good.
my mic okay?
Yeah, you're
there
good.
We go. Sorry. It
I
was
gotta say,
incredible.
it was absolutely incredible. I'm not like a community-driven person, and so for me to come here and realize all of this wonderful community that you have, and just the whole forum was fantastic. It was so nice meeting everyone. If there's anyone listening that was there, it was awesome to meet you.
It really was.
Yeah.
Yes, and
absolutely awesome.
I mean, like, just for me, it's like I get to talk to a lot of these guys like every day online. Yeah. I'm in group chats with these people. We hang out, and then finally having it all happen in person and getting to meet people who at least I've impacted in some small ways, if not more so, and then just having just great conversations and sharing stories and just hearing everybody's thoughts was just wonderful. I couldn't have asked for anything better, and I can't wait for Faithless Forum next year.
Yeah, me
right?
neither.
It's going to be amazing next
It's
year.
going to be
even bigger.
Even bigger and better. So you guys are both not from here, I guess is the best way to put it. What gave it away? I don't know, but so like you guys have been here for the past week or so, just kind of hanging out in Austin, kind of in some other areas too. Like how has the American tour been?
We've just went shooting.
Something I genuinely never thought I'd do.
Yeah, that's a thing, especially here in Texas. How did you enjoy it? I guess that's your first time, right?
Yeah.
Like for both of you, yeah.
It was terrifying and amazing and kind of empowering.
Oh, it's cool. Everyday stuff.
I grew up as a Boy Scout, and we did a lot of that kind of stuff growing up and stuff, and like it's just part of the American tradition here. I mean, there's just so many people. I mean, like and people talk about a gun culture and stuff. Like, yeah, especially here, like it's a thing. I mean,
I was just in Oxford with Alex O'Connor, a Cosmic Skeptic, and I thought, what can we do that represents where he's from? So we went punting, which is where you basically stand at the end of a bit of wood and you're punting along. That's quite different to here, where it's like, let's just go shoot an AK-47.
Yes. Well, not an AK-47, hopefully, right? That might get some legal trouble. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of people who have guns out here. It's just kind of normal. And like, that's where we're not going to talk about guns of all things, okay? Like, that's not the topic of discussion here. But yeah, it is a difference. Interesting to see a difference in culture there and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Did you do anything else besides shoot guns? I feel like you probably did some other stuff, right?
Yeah, no, we visited these nice waterfalls, had just a pretty chilled afternoon. That was amazing.
Yeah.
I met a frog, picked up a frog,
wonderful.
petted a frog.
Did you kiss it? Did it turn into a prince?
She did. It was disgusting.
Oh, man.
I had to say,
it didn't turn into a prince, but...
Yeah. I thought that you'd given up magical thinking and believing things on bad evidence, but no, she read a bit of text that said that if you kiss the frog, it turns into a prince, and she believed it on faith.
I did.
Well, for those of you who have never met these guys before, they're both content creators on YouTube. They've made, just videos about all kinds of stuff, just talking about skepticism in general and stuff, and just been working on different projects. I mean, you're also on the podcast with Thomas Westbrook.
Yes, The Here and How. It's like a science-based podcast where we we have long discussions about science
Yeah.
and fun stuff, and it's really fun.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's why they're here. In case you're wondering, why. And also, I did not realize both of you guys were still going to be in town this week, and it was like, oh well, I kind of scheduled. I was like, we got to get these guys on. Like,
Yeah, you forgot about me until like half an
no,
hour
that's not
ago.
true. That's not no. Forgot about is the wrong way to describe it. I would say
I feel rejected, to be
Okay,
honest.
well,
I thought we were friends.
you're already here now. Okay,
You're in the
so-
middle. You're here. He loves you. You're
That's
good.
right. That's right. Gosh, I mean, I have an article that I want to talk about in a second. But did you guys have anything else you guys want to say about Faithless Farm and like all that? Because I mean, I could talk about it for a long, long time. I thought it was just the best thing ever.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for having me.
Oh,
Thank you very
man.
much.
For what? What did I do? Didn't do nothing, man.
You have me here. It's always nice. It's nice to meet new people.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
I'm just glad that you guys got to make it out to the Atheist Community of Austin, and meet everybody and see, like, yeah, it's a community thing. And it's a bigger deal for some people than it is for others. Some people, they can live with it. But for people, especially who live around here, yeah, I mean, like, it's nice to meet like-minded people and swap stories and hear what's going on. And
The community here is incredible, and it's not at all anything we have in the UK. We have nothing similar. So seeing it and seeing all these people come together with like kind of shared goals, but not only that, just kind of as friends, it's amazing. It's really, really amazing to see.
Yeah.
And everyone's so welcoming as well.
isn't it nice?
It's so nice. It feels like, even with the people I just met, it feels like seeing old friends again.
Well, that's partly a Texas thing. I will warn you that now. It's not going to be the same way if you go across the whole United States. But just to remind people who are watching, this is a live call-in show. We have the number down there at the bottom. We got a few calls in here, but like we've got plenty of open lines. So please come call in, come talk to us about, really whatever you want. These guys are prepared for anything. So I have an article here, and I know, Rachel, I'm not sure if you got the chance to read it, but I know, Stephen, you got to read this. This was really interesting. I don't really read articles and stuff on here because I just not really that kind of show. But this was interesting because this actually involved me a little bit. So for those of you who don't know, I have a history with a friend of mine, Anthony Magnabosco, who does this whole street epistemology thing. And you could say I was one of his guinea pigs as part of his experiments a few years ago when I was a Christian. And lo and behold, I'm an atheist now. There might be a correlation there. Who knows? The jury's still out on that. But Greg Kokel, who is part of a website called Stand to Reason, made a recent article about street epistemology. And first of all, I have to say, this isn't the first time I have been mentioned in these kinds of articles, but it's been a long time, and Greg's kind of a bigger name and stuff. So I just wanted to talk about just the wording of how Greg kind of described my story a little bit. And I have the article out here, and I'm just going to read it out loud. It said, consider this scenario. An atheist engages two Christians on a sidewalk and begins to gently and genially engage them about their beliefs. Their initial breezy assurance begins to fade, however, as they falter in the face of carefully worded questions about the things they think they know by faith. Ooh, scary stuff. The atheist gives no evidence for atheism. He gives no evidence against Christianity. Instead, he only does one thing. He asks questions about faith as a way of knowing. He remains calm and friendly as the discussion closes, but by that time, one of the Christians is visibly uncomfortable. This scenario is not a piece of fiction, though. I watched the actual conversation's sad saga unfold on YouTube. The companion follow-up video documented the devastating consequences of the atheist's approach. One of the Christians, now an atheist, thanks his challenger for helping him see the irrational errors of his religious ways. And of course, you haven't gotten this by now. Yes, he's talking about me, and he's talking about my conversation with Anthony Magnabosco. And he has this link here in this article and stuff. And, he goes on to kind of critique SC, and he doesn't really reference me as much from there. But yeah, so like I get to be the fodder of someone's religious narrative. Isn't that just wonderful?
The way he's speaking about it just makes me feel like bringing up a teddy bear and going, show me on the teddy bear where he made you think.
Yeah. Well, like I see this criticism a lot with street epistemology. It's this idea of, you're actually atheists in disguise trying to spread atheism and stuff. And like, I think that you can do that. I think you can use this method to push all any kind of agenda you want if you ask the right kinds of questions, right? But if you're truly trying to be as neutral as possible, I think it's something that everybody can benefit from. And let me say this, I have benefited from this. Even if I became a Christian tomorrow, I would still say, wow, thank you for having this conversation, because I think even Greg agrees. When I said I believe because of faith, and not because of anything else, not because of particular evidence or any other kind of reasoning, I think that's a bad way to live your life. I don't think just saying just faith by itself is good for anything. You know,
I've got to say, I think there are a lot of fair criticisms of street epistemology, but one of the things I do like about it is that it doesn't tell people what to think. It just makes them question their own.
It's really interesting. I had a conversation with Anthony yesterday.
Yeah.
And I come at him with such criticisms because I find it intriguing. And I've left thinking, you know what? There is actually nothing wrong with it. Because it's because of the goal that's intended. So if you take advertising, advertisers use very similar techniques. So for example,
I think when you say there's nothing wrong with it, it depends on the person who's doing it.
I think it depends on their goal.
Yes.
So like if their goal is to try and sell you a product like Christianity, then, you know.
I also think the circumstances matter as well. For example, I think I would be bothered if someone came up to me on the street while I was just doing my shopping and tried to change my mind about these like massive core beliefs.
Yeah.
But if they came up to you and said, would you mind having a conversation? Would you like one?
I kind of see that, but also I still find it a bit unwarranted. It annoys me when, like, there's a guy who stands out my local Superdrug and he always tells me I'm going to hell. And I'm like, mate, I just want to buy concealer.
Yeah, but he's just telling you. He's not saying,
Yeah.
would you like to engage in conversation?
But there are also people who stand outside my local Boots and they say, would you like to hear about this new internet we have?
Yeah.
And I'm like, mate, I just want to buy concealer.
Well,
It's the same kind of thing. I feel like when it's...
you know,
I buy a lot of concealer, okay?
Yeah.
the context of me having my conversation was interesting because I was actually part of a college ministry, and we were actually we were about to go to a meeting. It's me and another guy, and so like in theory, I'm supposed to be the one that's out evangelizing anyway, and that's what we did when I was part of the organization. We actually went out and had conversations with people and bothered people and stuff. But, you know, when I talked to Anthony, and I don't know if everybody gets the same vibe, so I could be jealous, but like I'm not jealous, but bias is what I mean to say. I never got the vibe, the entire 30-minute conversation from him, that he was trying to sell me something, that he was trying to like get me somewhere. It seemed like he genuinely had questions about why I believe what I believe. And I think that's the best way to approach it. I don't think everybody that uses this method or even talks about it and stuff are doing that, and that's unfortunate. But when I had it, I was so interested and invested in this conversation. And I think you see this a lot with Anthony too, because one, he's a genuine guy, but like if you go to his videos and you look at the people who are talking to him, like, look at the end of the conversations. They're smiling about this most of the time. Like, they're really enjoying having this. And, you know, Anthony in particular doesn't monetize his videos and stuff. He's not, like, I don't think he's really exploiting people as much. He's always getting their consent from people. And if people don't want to have the conversations on there, he's always the first to be like, okay, we can take it down. We can do this and that. And so, you know, there's definitely some ethical implications. Oh, my goodness. Rachel, I don't know why you're nervous tonight, because I'm just not doing great. But there's some ethical considerations after this, right? But I'm glad that I had the conversation. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
You know?
Seems to have done well for you.
I think so.
And well for everybody.
Not according to Greg Kokel.
Not according to
Greg and other people who have written about me and stuff like that. But anyway, I just thought this was just a really weird and interesting thing to bring up, because
Must have been really peculiar for you to read it and go, he's talking about me.
Yeah, you know, it's like, you know, you read news about other people and you don't know the full story. But you read this guy, it's like, I 101% know this story. Like, I know this better than you do. You know what I mean? And, you know, and what can I do except talk about it on a show, right?
So does he conclude that basically you were manipulated out of Christianity with tricks?
I think what his thing is, straight epistemology is atheism, evangelism in disguise, and that I was tricked. And if only I knew these certain kinds of apologetics and the way that people use definitions of faith, I would be a Christian again, even though it's not like, oh, I only tried to look at the apologetics and I came to my own conclusions about this stuff. But the thing was, I didn't know about these apologetics when I believed anyway. And another criticism here that he's bringing up is Christians use this word faith when really they're talking about knowledge, and that when Christians use faith, they should use knowledge based on evidence, which is like, you know, kind of a semantic thing that they bring up.
I find there's like an equivocation with the word faith. So when you'll find someone that goes, I believe something on faith, and then when you ask them to justify their position, what they do is they give you a definition of trust, which is to say that they trust something or someone or some information based on actually really quite good reasoning. But that isn't the type of faith or trust that they are employing when they say the earth is 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
Or when they say that a God definitely exists and it cares about who you sleep with and in what position. It's a whole different ballgame. But a lot of people don't realize that they are not using the definition of faith that they think they are. And I think one thing that you can achieve by just asking people gentle questions without attacking them, for example, which is what street epistemology kind of does, you'll get them themselves to reveal, oh, maybe I'm not using that definition.
Yeah.
In which case, what do I do about that? And what ramifications does it have towards my views?
Yeah, so, the apologists will always be like, well, this is the biblical definition of faith, and people should be using this and that. And there's kind of that appeal to it, but the main criticism I see is, but if the Christians themselves aren't using this, like I didn't use that unique, let's call it unique definition of faith that you have, right? So why does that matter to me because if I didn't, right, then you're basically saying my entire Christian story, like my entire Christian life was based on faulty reasoning, which it very well could have been, but it wouldn't just be me. It would be millions and millions of people who also think the same way that I do. So I don't know what to say about that. But we have a bunch of other calls here if you guys want to get to that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right.
Go for it.
Cool. Well, again, this is a call-in show. We do have some open lines, so feel free to call in. Come talk to us. I want to get to Karen in California. I think she has something interesting to talk about. I read here, Karen, that you want to talk about nationalism and religion in the UK. Karen, what's up?
Yes. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great, Karen. Thanks so much for calling.
The reason I'm calling is that I saw Rachel and Steve on Thomas Westbrook's show, and I had a question about some of the things they said regarding Brexit and nationalism and sovereignty in the UK. Rachel, I really appreciated your comment about, this is just a slight aside, about Muslim men also being forced to marry against their will. I live in California where we have a rather large Muslim population, and I have had quite a few friends that were forced to marry their cousins and people back in the Middle East who I'd gone to school with them here. They had to go back to the Middle East and marry their cousins and people they barely knew because of their religion. So I have also had that shared experience. I also wanted to ask Steve, and Steve, by the way, I'm getting your game. I'm really excited about getting your game, the card game. That's going to be awesome.
Thank you very much, Karen.
But I wanted to ask you a question about something you guys said, because you talked about not talking about religion and not talking about, and when you talk about politics, it's not a big deal. But my ancestors came to the United States to mine when the tin mines ran out of tin in Cornwall, England. They're from Redruth. And one of the things that I have long been aware of is there are people in the UK that I have to say, kind of look down on Cornish people. And I thought that this was no longer true until I started watching some British television shows that we get over here. And I was really quite surprised about some of the comments that are still being made. My question is, even though you said it wasn't a deal, is there still that nationalism and in the UK itself where, for example, I thought maybe some of the areas that wanted Brexit wanted it to be pure indigenous population. Is that part of what happened? Do people still talk about that? Or is that something that you guys kind of try to smooth over and kind of ignore the way we try to smooth over and ignore some of the differences in our groups? I'm also a former neo-pagan, and I know that there are some of the so-called Celtic areas, I put quotes around that because that's not really a historical term, that's more of a modern term, where people feel that and this is not just in the UK, but this is also in Europe where people feel, so for example, in Poland, where their ancient religion should matter more than letting people from the outside in. So anyway, I'm just throwing that out to you and seeing if you've heard of anything or if you have any feedback on that.
So
couldn't have picked a better time to ask this question with these two on, right?
I've got to
know.
say, fantastic
I'm
question.
so excited about this. I was so excited when I saw you guys on. I was like, oh, Mom, I have to call. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Yeah, so I think it definitely depends on the area of the UK that you're living in. I'm sure Steve's experience will be very different to mine. So to give you a little bit of background, I grew up in South Yorkshire, which is way up north. I lived in the Midlands for probably in total about 4 or 5 years. I lived in Oxford for a while, Coventry for a while, and now I'm down in London. I've also lived on the south coast in Brighton, so I've kind of experienced a little bit of everywhere. It's not just the area you live in, but also, I guess, the kind of people you're around. So I don't want to sound elitist, but the people with less education are definitely less tolerant of other people. One thing I found up in Yorkshire was that there's a lot of people who hate anyone different to them. They hate outsiders. I go back up there now, and because I've lost my accent, they treat me like an outsider, and honestly, I get disrespected quite a lot. I have people mocking me, like if I go to the pub and be like, oh, who's this? So if I get that when I'm born in Yorkshire, just because I've lost my accent, imagine how someone who is born outside the UK is treated. It's kind of horrific to see sometimes. There was a video I saw when the whole Brexit vote was going on of people on Barnsley High Street literally being so disgustingly racist, it made me sick to say I was from there. They were all like, oh, we don't want them immigrants coming in here. We don't want them Muslims coming in here. And yeah, it was completely ridiculous. It was completely unfounded, but they believed it so strongly and so passionately. And I hated that. There are people who, like you, voted for Brexit because you actually have your reasons and you actually thought about it. And then I know people who voted for Brexit because they were like, oh, we just, we want to change. We want to stop people coming into our country and using our stuff.
I spoke with one person who was basically saying, I'm voting for Brexit because I'm sick of having Indians in the NHS. And I had to explain, India's not in the European Union. They're not affected by it. Yeah. But there's what I would say, Karen. Unless you want to finish, I don't.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
The UK is nowhere near as religious as the US, but make no mistake about it, we are just as stupid as the US.
We had to get it from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And what I mean by that is that we are. Politics is quite divisive in the UK, and. Like what you were just saying there, where there's some people that are far right, if you will, and they're very nasty. I've had lots of people just say that they cannot stand me because I voted for Brexit. And opposite to what you said, these people are educated. Oh, yeah. So I'm getting educated people being very tribalistic, being just like, we don't want to know you anymore. So I think that the UK is full of people, and people can be, unfortunately...
it's just like anywhere, really.
Unable to take any kind of nuance or grey area. But hopefully with the conversations we're having and the way that everything's progressing, we get to a time where people can disagree without completely removing from their life people
I think though, like you say, it is about the individuals. Like, I found an incredible group of friends I can just go to the pub with and chat about anything from religion to politics to what TV we're watching, and it's just a nice chilled discussion, and everyone just kind of has a good time, and we share our thoughts, and some people change their mind and some people don't, and you have that. But then there's also groups of people where will get heated, and people will get very angry, and people will get very emotional about it. It just depends on the individuals.
Yeah, and one last thing I would definitely say on this matter is that your call, or the notes for your call, says about nationalism and religion. The two are linked in the UK. It's quite rare that you'll find someone that's nationalistic that isn't religious. Normally they are religious. That's what I was
wondering.
Yeah.
No, I disagree up north.
You disagree up north, so you'll find people that are not religious and
but they are
nationalistic.
Okay. They want to keep Yorkshire.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's not a lot of religion up there, so you can't blame that.
And I guess that kind of begs the question of, what do we mean by nationalism? And also, is it necessarily wrong if you want to make sure that the people that come to your location are, I forget the word that they use, but becoming part of your society rather than a separate part, which is something we have in many places with Birmingham and places like that, where people can't speak the same language because of the way in which immigration has occurred.
That's true. I think there's often people get mixed up between those things, though, where people will just see any immigrants coming into the country as like going off and doing their own things and not being a part of the country and just sucking our resources. There are some people who seem to think that all immigrants are like that, which is not the case at all.
Not at all.
A huge percentage of some of our best NHS doctors are immigrants.
Oh,
and
yeah,
nurses.
NHS for sure. Yeah.
A large part of academics, immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
My university, I went to Warwick, so many lecturers were from international universities. And the skills that immigrants can bring to the UK is invaluable, and we can't ignore that. And I think some people forget about it.
Yeah,
And,
I agree with that. I
yeah.
think you could flip it as well, and that is that when it comes to places such as Yorkshire and places where it's cheaper to live, with the EU being what it is and having open borders, people can move in without any skills or education whatsoever, which is kind of unique because, for example, if we wanted to move to the US or Australia, we must prove that we have a skill that either the US or Australia wants. Whereas
Does YouTuber count as one of those skills?
I'm not entirely sure. It'd be quite interesting. Maybe they'll go, pay us enough money, and then maybe. But what I was going to say is that with that situation, you have an influx of uneducated, unskilled workers just doing what's best for them and totally all on them. Yeah. But then you have high levels of these people in certain locations, and then you get a backlash from the communities there. It's all ever so complex, as I'm sure me and Rachel
really
will
is, yeah.
illustrate.
Yes, more complex than a call-in show could probably ever say. But that's a caveat that comes with every single call. So, what do you think about that, Karen? Was that deep enough for you?
I wish I could talk to you all for hours. It's wonderful, and it sounds like your complex situation is complex, like our situation is too, and that we actually have more in common than differences on the whole immigration issue. I grew up in a neighborhood that was only 6% white. And almost everyone was an immigrant. And it was absolutely wonderful. And I miss that. But we still have a lot of people that are bigoted here, too, even though we have a great diversity for a lot of the same reasons that you just mentioned. So anyway, thank you for talking to me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for calling.
I'm going to keep watching your
welcome.
YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Always a pleasure, Karen. Thanks again for calling. Oh, Karen. Karen has a repeat call on the show.
Aww.
She's great. Love
That's
having her
good.
call in.
She was lovely.
She is fantastic. I absolutely love it when she calls in. But we got some more calls here, and I just want to remind people we still got lines open. So if you want to call in, come call in. Just here in the studio tonight with Stephen Woodford, aka Rationality Rules, and Rachel Oates. It's happening. It's really, really fun in here. I wish I could go down to my what do you call it, chaps to the pub. With your mates in the pub. Is that I don't know. I'm embarrassing
Mates
myself.
at the pub's good.
Yeah,
It works.
mates at the pub.
Okay,
I
all right.
want to have a
Go
drink
for
with
a
the
pint.
lads.
That's fine. I'll work with that.
Yeah. Are we going for a pint after this? Down at the pub.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. But next, before we do that, let's go ahead and go to Mitchell in Ohio. I have a note here, Mitchell, that you used to believe in ghosts and the paranormal, but you don't now. What's up, Mitchell? I said Mitchell. Hello, can you hear us?
Kind of nervous, but
It's
That's okay.
all good, man.
I'm nervous too, don't worry.
Yeah, you're good, Mitchell. Don't worry.
You're just so chill, Steve.
Okay, Mitchell, what is up, man? Tell us your story.
well, I was an atheist. I was a Christian until I was about 16, and then for some reason I was afraid to call myself an atheist. Instead, I called myself a Satanist instead. But that was really complicated to explain to people. So I decided to start calling myself an atheist when I turned 18.
Cool.
But the thing is, I still believed in ghosts and paranormal shit even after that. I don't know why, but I still did.
Yeah, well, you still qualified as an atheist.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that don't make that distinction. They think that, if you're an atheist, you have to believe in X, Y, and Z because a lot of other atheists think the same way, but it's really just not true, at all. So that, the joke has always been made, getting atheists together is like herding a group of cats. So many people believe in so many different things. It's one of those things. But if you don't have any God beliefs, then you're good.
And that's all the definition is, you know? So it really is that simple. So do you still believe in ghosts, or is that no longer?
Not really.
No.
So what made you
I stumbled. I saw one in Steven's videos about the whole Ouija board thing, and I'm like, damn, he got a point.
Thank you.
Oh man, the Ouija. I could talk about Ouija boards for so long because within the whole history of how it's just a modern thing. That's the funniest thing to me. I didn't know that. It's just a modern.
It was originally supposed to just be a board game.
It's a Mattel board game that it's just a bunch of executives kind of put together. It doesn't have some sort of ancient tradition or anything.
The thing is, my mum is still terrified of them.
Really?
Yeah, she's like, whatever you do, don't go near a Ouija board. Just don't do it. Don't risk it.
I've had that as well. So
Really?
I'm going to go to the most haunted location in England, and I'm going to play a Ouija board in the
Can I
hotel.
come, please?
Yeah, you can come. And then I'm just going to go to sleep.
Yeah.
I think we're more likely to be killed by like some like burglar or serial killer than a ghost.
Bring it on.
Mitchell, you dropped all the ghosts and the paranormal stuff. How did that happen? Was it just watching YouTube or?
Well, I used to be a big fan of Zach Bagans, Ghost Adventures guy.
Oh yeah.
I kind of realized this dude was a complete fucking fraud.
So I know they have these in the UK, but you know these ghost adventure shows, right? These people who go and they film, and they're a lot more. I'm sure they're more popular
boring.
here.
No offense.
Say again.
UK ghost shows are boring as shit.
Oh, really? Oh.
Called out.
Even our ghosts are boring.
Boring.
They just come in. They just want a cup of tea. They just want to chat.
But they are more polite.
Yeah. They don't haunt you as well. Like,
They knock on the doors before they just walk through the walls.
Right.
Exactly. They hold the doors open for you.
right. You know, like it's so if you know anything about how reality television works, I got this is so. I don't think I've told this story actually. So at a Christian camp I used to go to, there was a show from the Travel Channel called Bert the Conqueror, and they went around different places. This guy named Bert who like does these cool things, and we had one of those blobs, like kind of like you see in those summer camp movies and stuff. And he wanted to do it with a bunch of us kids there. And like the way that, like just to set up a few shots, maybe like a minute of footage, 2 minutes of footage in the actual show, took all day to film. And they had all these kids doing all this stuff that was all, like scripted and things like that. And that really woke me up when I was a teenager to this idea of, like so much on TV is so scripted. Like you have no idea. It takes days for them to make this stuff that seems like it's on the fly, I don't know if you guys had any experience with that.
I literally do that.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's scripted, and I
Right.
spent a long time, and so
There.
what looks like it took me 5 minutes. He's so articulate. It's like, no, I'm stupid. It just took me a hell of a long time to write it.
Like, it's the same with me in my videos, because I don't script like you do,
No.
but I do a hell of a lot of research, and then I have bullet points that I talk about. So when I make like a 20-minute video, I'll normally like film for an hour just like talking, and then I have so much stuff to cut out. It's just like, no, that doesn't work. No, I didn't express that properly.
So Mitchell, if I was to come to you right now and say, Mitchell, I believe in ghosts. They're out there, man. You're not believing hard enough. You haven't seen what I've seen, man. What would you say to that?
I've been in that situation before. Fine.
Probably good, yeah.
You just let people believe what they want as long as it's not harming anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think ghost beliefs are probably some of the more, well, I say that they're less harmless,
I
but
think believing in ghosts is harmless, but it's when psychics
you know what? I take that back
take advantage of that.
because the people who believe in demons, who are like, oh, this person is being filled with demons, like they say a lot of, like that's a rhetoric about gay people and stuff.
I don't know. When most people tell me they believe in demons, they always bring up, "Have you seen The Exorcist?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah, that movie, that Hollywood
that
movie.
documentary.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen
The
SpongeBob?
Catholic priest is scarier than the demon.
That's true. The Flying Dutchman is also part of the, but like when people start talking about demons, that can be kind of problematic too, because it's
Yeah.
like this person is
really-
possessed. We have to make rules, and
It really is an interesting question about when to leave it. So, for example, a lot of people have the superstition of touching wood
Oh, yeah.
for good luck. Okay, now, the part of me wants to look at that and go, that's irrational. It's silly. It's not true. There's no evidence for it. But I don't care. Like, they're not hurting anyone. But the thing is, if someone really does believe that, it leaves them susceptible to believing other stuff, which is divisive and is nasty. So it's hard to find a balance of when to say something or when not to. For me, I draw the line on how much of a friend I am to that individual. So if I know them well, I'm going to grill them. But if I don't, then I tend to leave it at
What
that.
about when I tell you that every time I see a patch of clovers, I still look for a 4-leaf clover, so it's good luck?
I'd just say that, do you actually believe in the luck, or is it a habit?
just a bit of fun, isn't it?
There you go. There's no problem. There's no
There
problem.
you go. There you go. I love having two co-hosts. They get to have banter all on their own, and I don't have to do anything.
Can I ask Stephen a question real quick? Or
Very quickly, Mitchell, and then we're going to go ahead and go to our next caller.
okay, Stephen, why do people believe in paranormal beliefs? Is it just because we're scared of death so much, or?
It's a really good question. I'll try and give you a succinct enough answer. From what I can tell, and I'm no expert, but from what I can tell from all of the conversations and all of what I've learned, we haven't evolved to be rational. That seems to be the really big issue. So there's a good story that Richard Dawkins has given before about how natural selection works and how it selects things that aren't necessarily rational. So if we're in the woods or we're in a hunting, gathering situation, and there's a rustle in the bush behind us, we either make the rational assumption, which is that it's probably leaves or a very small animal or whatever it might be. And most times you're going to be correct. Or you make the irrational assumption that it's a big bad monster that's going to kill you. And all it takes is one time for you to be rational and for the answer to be irrational, and a lion will grab you and you're out of the, especially if you haven't reproduced by then, you're pulled out of the gene pool, and so genes propagate which see patterns when they're not there. And I think that's one of the largest reasons why we are always going to be somewhat irrational. It's in us to be this way. I don't think we'll ever really get out of it. And then when you combine that with the fact that we've also evolved and we are in this state where we really think that we matter, and we're finding out more and more that, you know what, Earth isn't the only planet that can possibly harbour life, and there are thousands of
trillions of galaxies.
Trillions of galaxies. Evolution is a process that doesn't need a conscious mind. There's no God there, for example. All of these bitter pills are really hard to swallow for a hell of a lot of people, because it just means that you're not the centre. In fact, you're the opposite. You matter not one part whatsoever in the grand scheme. And a lot of people just can't swallow that pill. It's just too difficult.
Do you not think that on like a smaller scale, though, a lot of it is about us not being able to cope well with loss? This idea of us wanting to see our loved ones again, hoping there's something more.
Yeah, I think so. It is largely that with the selection process, whatever works best for increasing our propagation at the gene level, not as the individual level, is going to be what's selected for. And we don't need to know what happens after we die because it's irrelevant. You've either by then passed on your genes, or you've helped your loved one.
Well, nowadays I just think nothing happens after you die. I know that's kind of a...
Yeah, exactly. So I think it is partly
we
what
actually did a
frightened.
collab on like sort of coming to terms with death, didn't we? Which was quite interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, I think death is very much up there. Freud was pretty much on the money when he did point out that observation.
And sometimes beliefs that we have may be true, but they don't provide any benefit for us. Like the belief of not having an afterlife or something that doesn't necessarily provide me a benefit.
Maybe it does, though. You know.
I think
Here's one.
Okay. Well, hang on. Let's give Mitchell our farewell. Thank you, Mitchell,
Thank
for
you,
calling
Mitchell.
in.
Thank
I
you
really
so much.
appreciate that.
Thanks, man, Stephen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you
Big fan of you.
Yeah, thank you for calling in. All right, Steven. Now you can hit me with this thing. What are you trying to tell me?
You'll never have this conversation again. When we die, we won't be able to spend time together, and so every moment we do is all the more precious.
It's like I said at Faithless Forum.
Yeah.
If this is the one life you have, why not make the most of it?
Okay, so I can see the existentialism coming in here and being like, we got to make our own purpose and stuff like that. I think that's a conclusion that because like I'm going to say this, like Christian indoctrination, right, didn't allow me to think that way. It made me think in terms of, this is the only life I have, so I got to make it count in the sense of, or else I'll have a punishment and or reward afterwards, or else I won't be with my Lord for eternity and stuff like that. And so like the idea of eternity was really something that was drilled into my mind as something really important. Like when I figured out like, I'm not going to live forever and I'm not going to matter to anybody one day, like that hit me kind of hard. That was one of the hardest things for me to get over, I think.
Yeah, but for now, for all you know, for all you experience, you are going to matter. So make the most of that.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, right now, you doing the show, you are mattering to people. You are making a difference to people. I mean, people are calling up. That means you make a difference.
It's for you, man.
Oh,
Yeah.
look at this. I can get these guys on more. This is great stuff. I love this.
Should we just boost his ego a little bit more?
Oh, man.
Why not? He's
You're
going to
looking
die
great
and never
today,
be
though.
remembered forever. So let's do him a favor.
Yeah, well, you're gonna die too, Steven. So what difference does it
So, where's your evidence?
make? Oh man, we got some.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Oh yes,
Until like humanity's gone, and then it doesn't.
there you go. We could just end the show just right there and then just later on. But we do have some more calls on the line, so let's go ahead and get to these guys. I want to get to Chris in Missouri, and Chris has a question that's come up on the show before, but I'm glad you guys are here to maybe kind of give your opinions on this. Chris is asking about counter arguments against presuppositionalism. How's it going, Chris?
Hello.
Hey.
Doing good.
Awesome.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
So I have seen presuppositionalists on the Atheist Community shows, like Darth Dawkins, for example. And one of the things I've seen that at least I noticed a lot is there's a lot of different ways to counter the arguments. But I think there's a major flaw that I've been thinking about, that I've always wanted to talk to a presuppositionalist and see what they say, but I was just curious.
You called the wrong show. I don't
wanna
think
make
any
sure
of us
there's
are
no problem.
presuppositionalists. So
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, but
I just wanted to make sure that it's not necessarily, there's nothing, irrational about it or something like that.
sure.
So, hey, I was really, but here, I'll just kind of go through it. But basically, from what it seems like, you use logic to set up your arguments when you're talking about something. That's your basis.
Yep.
And when they're using God as their basis, at least from my understanding, in order for them to even talk about that, they're also still assuming logic. So when they're saying that you can't know that logic is true unless God exists as that foundation, the argument they're making already assumes that logic is the case. And if they didn't do that, then they could have a God that could lie and not lie to you at the same time. And they couldn't tell the difference. No one could tell the difference. And I'm not sure that, I've never really seen that kind of way to talk about that. But it seems like it's almost like it's a similar argument to the way they do it, because they say you're borrowing from that worldview. But in order to even understand their own worldview, they have to accept logic in the same way that everyone does.
Real quick before Steven responds to this, we can hear a stream in the background. If you could just mute that for us, that would be awesome.
Yeah, here, I just go to a different room.
Thanks. So it seemed that what you were driving at is the presuppositionalist must presume the laws of logic before they can have God. Is that correct on what you were trying to get across?
Yeah, and they use it. They use the God to get to logic.
Yeah. So it's either one way or the other. So it can be that it depends on who you're talking to. You can pre-assume God, or you can pre-assume the laws of logic. And if you pre-assume the laws of logic and then you say there's a God, then you have to show it using that logic. So in that case, there's no issue. It just becomes a burden of proof that needs to be fulfilled like any other. Whereas if they assume a God, they need to say why they assume the God before they assume the laws of logic. And that's where things get interesting. I think you'll find that it depends on who you speak with as to the way in which they approach it, and they'll approach it in slightly different ways. If you want tips on a very specific way, then it would be best for you to give us a little bit more of a feel for what you're looking for.
Okay. I was just kind of curious what your thoughts were. One other question that might be relevant is when dealing with, and I've seen this done on a live stream before, where you use street epistemology to talk to someone who's a presuppositionalist. I was wondering if just blanked on your. I was just wondering if anyone had any experience with how that might go, and just, asking questions, trying to get down to how they come to that conclusion.
Well, I did talk to Darth Dawkins one time. He did call into the show. And Cy-10 Bruggencate talked about coming on. He never actually came on. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen that conversation, it didn't go anywhere. And I think it doesn't really, I mean, there's different kinds of people. I think there's people who kind of find these arguments for the first time and they kind of find them convincing, and maybe you can kind of talk about these things. And then there are people who have been doing this stuff for years, who've been kind of doing the same script and stuff, and it doesn't matter how many people they talk to, they're just going to want to keep talking about the same thing, right? Like, and that's fine. I think if you show someone who is like figuring this out for the first time, who hasn't got this ingrained in their head and is honest with how they approach this stuff, then you might be able to convince them. The real problem is I haven't found like one complete epistemology, one basis of truth and knowledge and yada yada that completely trumps like the kind of presuppositionalist mindset, because we can work with different assumptions and different kind of frameworks. I don't know of a framework that doesn't have any flaws. I think no matter which one you kind of approach it to, there's always going to be limitations to it. So unless there's some philosopher out there that can prove to me otherwise, I
think, it's a great point. I think the best you can get when it comes to epistemology is, I think, therefore I am, and then even then it gets. And even then it gets kind of it gets a little bit thing. But the basic point is that you admit that you could be wrong on pretty much everything. Mm-hmm. And so when you speak with somebody and you say, what do you know for sure, which is a good question to ask, talking about the street epistemology that you were mentioning, and then you can ask them why. But when they say they know for sure that God exists, you know that you're having an issue here, because we know that humans cannot know anything for certain, basically. Maybe there's I think, therefore I am. And then the whole conversation is going to be about that very small baseline. And the fact that it doesn't often go anywhere just illustrates how important it is at that baseline.
And I don't see people talking about this point in particular, but like the idea of God itself is a socio-cultural thing that like came up in history, at least from what we study, right? Like we can show a time before people thought of the Hebrew God and the Judeo-Christian God essentially, and people who come to it now. So like we at least have evidence that this was an idea that people came up with. I don't know if we could say the same if we're talking about assuming that everybody knows God. And like if you really believe that everybody in their heart knows Jehovah specifically and like Yahweh and not any other, like I think you're missing out on the entirety of human history, and you're completely ignoring just everybody who's ever said anything to the contrary. And like it's hard to work with that. It's like, okay, if you're not going to listen to these people, I'm sure you're not going to listen to me. So
And when you do talk to presuppositionalists, I think it does actually have to require some form of street epistemology, because you need to get down to how they've justified their worldview. And so those are the conversations you're going to have.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. This was awesome. Yeah, good conversations have good results. Sometimes, not always. But yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to a whole lot of presuppositionalists. Like I've only talked to a few. And so I don't know, if I talk to Matt, I'm sure he could give better advice about this kind of stuff. But I think it's to me, maybe you guys encountered this differently, it seems to be a pretty niche position compared to what you find a lot with these kinds of apologetics and stuff. Was that your experience too? I mean,
yeah, it's my experience. Yeah. Most strong apologetics, which is to say that people that have a decent following, they accept the laws of logic, they accept the rules that we seem to be having to play by, and they believe that there's a case to be made for their God. And so they're playing chess, if you will. Whereas there are a few that bring it all the way back down into the presuppositional state, but it is rarer. And I think the reason it is rarer is that it's pretty weak, in my opinion, and from my experience. But it is an oddball in the sense that it is philosophical. And so you'll find someone who's very smart who won't necessarily be able to deal with it because they're not philosophically minded. And this gives the illusion that it's actually a really good argument. It's not, it's terrible. It's a bit like the ontological argument. The ontological argument is probably the worst argument for a God I have ever heard. But if you don't understand philosophy, then it can actually be very hard to digest.
Yeah, even when I was a Christian, when I first read the ontological argument, I was like, this is BS. Like, even then, I was like, no, there's got to be better ones than that. But,
Yep. Did you like the watchmaker analogy?
You know what? I think it gave me pause when I first kind of encountered that, because it's like, oh, the human body is very complex and animals are very complex and stuff. But I also at the time was taking some like physical anthropology courses and so a lot of other stuff. So it's like, but we also have explanations for like a lot of this stuff that we see in these kind of intricacies.
I certainly think that the teleological watchmaker analogy is the best argument the religious have ever had.
Really?
But it's game over now. Oh yeah, it's a fantastic argument.
Okay.
Put it this way then.
I would say
maybe
Kalam
not.
can be convincing if you word it right.
This is why I'd say the teleological.
Okay.
I think the difference for me is that like I'm not very into philosophy like you guys are, but I am into my science.
But the teleological one is scientific as well. And if you go beyond...
Yeah, that's what I mean, which is why I find it easier to point out the flaws in that than...
Oh, I see. Okay, cool.
than the others.
Do you think that before Darwin, you would have been brought into the teleological argument?
I don't know.
It's a really interesting question. But I got a feeling that I would as well. Yeah. Because if you take all of the amazing minds before it, not many people were able to... Like David Hume, he was able to step past it. And David Hume was brilliant. There's very few people that managed to get past it until we had a good explanation for how complexity such as us and other animals can occur naturally without a conscious mind. That's why I think it's the best argument.
Interesting.
But I understand that's a divergent.
We may have to talk more about that later, because I don't know. I think it depends on the apologetic, and it depends on the denomination as well. I think some can be more convincing than others. But I want to go to this next call. This is kind of interesting. This is Stan in Philadelphia, and what's written here in the description is, what is the value of coming out as an atheist? And I think our answers are going to be very different on this. So, Stan, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, I can.
What's going on, man?
Okay, yeah. So I've called before. So how you doing again, Dan?
Doing great. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for asking. What a nice... You know, not all my callers ask me how I'm doing, and I really appreciate that, Stan. So.
And Rachel, I subscriber of yours, and I've been a big fan for a while, so you've been doing great work.
Oh, thank you so much. That's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. I really liked your anti-vax video. I thought that was fantastic, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
And Rationality rules, you're great. Yeah.
Cheers, man. You too, Stan. You're great.
So, what I wanted to ask about is the value of coming out as an atheist. So, I'll tell you my story. My family has actually kind of been more or less okay with it. It's like, whatever. I mean, for the longest time, like, I just stopped going to church, you know, and I didn't believe, I didn't say anything aloud, but like when I finally got around to saying, or when they finally got around to asking me, it was just like, okay. I mean, they weren't happy with it, but, you know, it was seeable. But at work, I came out to a friend of mine, so I had known for a few years while we were working there, and I just offhandedly said it was a conversation about religion somehow, and I offhandedly mentioned, you know, I'm an atheist, and like the reaction was immediate and like really unexpected. And he said something like, "So you think my religion is wrong," or something like that, right? And I promise you that none of those words came out of my mouth, right? Mm-hmm. I just mentioned what I was, and he kind of had this like extreme reaction. He calmed down soon afterwards, and I just explained myself. But like that, like kind of left me shaking, because like he's like one of the most liberal people like I've ever met, you know, and very accepting of all kinds. You know, he's faced discrimination of his own, and so it was just like jarring, right? Mm-hmm. And then, I guess a few months later, another friend that I'd known there for about a year, I guess, at that point, and we had been even closer. We had talking plenty of times, like long conversations, like ignoring work, and just like long conversations, and having fun with this guy. And I didn't know his religious inclination like at all. He never really said anything, so it led me to believe he wasn't especially religious. But apparently, I was completely wrong. So when I finally I mentioned this to him, right? Like he got this look on his face, like he was looking at me in a completely different light, right? And we started this conversation, and we left our office and started walking around the building, right, having this long running conversation, in which he was saying like the worst things, right? He was saying that, like, you know, well, you don't really don't believe, right? Or you're still a good person, like you're not like the others, right? I said, no, I am definitely an atheist. I'm like all the rest, you know? And it was just a long litany of things that I was not expecting. It was really emotionally taxing. And at the end of it, you know, I told him, like, if like we can never discuss this again. Like we can never talk about this topic again. We're going to be friends because like we'll have to end our relationship because this was the worst thing, you know. So and then there was a bit more of a minor point, right? Like I think it must have been around the same time. Actually, it's probably what brought up the conversation in the first place, because he was trying to set me up on a blind date with one of his coworkers in his department. And I guess I mentioned that I wasn't religious, and then apparently she was, and then I said, well, you know, he brought it up, and I said, you know, well, let me meet her anyway. You know, we'll see if we can hit it off. But like, apparently, he was kind of embarrassed that he like set up a Christian girl with an atheist, so he like made sure to call the whole thing off. So it was terrible. So I guess my question is that I see that you guys do good work, you know, being out and proud atheists, you know, like, and spreading the message and all that. But do you guys make judgment calls in your own life as to when, where to come out? Are there people in your life, like maybe at work or in some other places, where you just decided like this looks like it's going to be a fight and I'm not going to bother, or you guys are you all in?
So I think it's a little bit different for us because we're quite lucky in the UK that atheism isn't really a big deal. That said, I have had a lot of particularly young girls email me and message me saying that they've had issues when they've come out as atheists to their parents or their family or things like that. And so for me, on the whole, I would encourage people, when they're old enough and they're able to look after themselves and support themselves, to be completely open and honest about their beliefs, because it's nothing to be ashamed of, and everyone should be able to live this like I guess their most like honest life, if that makes sense. And they should be able to share their beliefs with their friends and the people who they're closest to. And there is a positive in it, especially when it comes to dating, because it might be difficult to date someone with different beliefs to you and stuff like that. However, I do think, especially amongst younger people, telling their family that they're an atheist might not always be the best thing, because it's not always safe for them. And if you can't look after yourself or support yourself, then you need to look out for you and do what's best for you. And I guess with adults, you have to think about the same kind of things, but not necessarily in a you have to rely on other people kind of way, but more in a, if you're in a situation where you think telling them you're an atheist or telling them you're any religion could be dangerous, you have to maybe make that judgment call and not do it. For example, it might not even just be atheism. A Muslim might not want to tell people that they're a Muslim if it's going to get them in trouble or put them in danger. So you have to make that judgment call. And while I don't think it's right to have to hide parts of yourself from your friends, your family, your work colleagues, any part of your life, your safety always comes first, and that's what you have to consider.
It is a difficult balance to get, and I'm sorry to hear about what you've suffered, Stan.
It is really.
Me and Rachel, as she rightfully said, we don't suffer from being atheists. In fact, most people are atheists.
Ever in your personal lives?
No, other than my
besides
nan.
family, right? Besides family, just peers and things like that. Has it ever happened?
The one time anyone's had a problem with it was when I was 17 or 18, and it was a census. My mum was like filling us down, and she marks us all down as Church of England. And I was like, oh no, can you just put me as an atheist, please? Because, I want the stats to be accurate. And she was like, oh, but what will people say? I was like, what do you mean, what will people say? And she was like, oh, I don't want them thinking my daughter's an atheist.
Yeah.
And then, I actually, sat down with her and I was like, what do you mean? What is wrong with this? And we had a big argument. And then in the end, we settled it. And now she, goes around telling everyone, oh, my daughter does YouTube and she talks about this, and she's fine with it. But for that moment, it was tough.
Yeah.
That,
And that's the closest I've got. And it's not half as bad as what some people have to put up with.
in my experience, people think about things in completely different ways. Like when I first came out to my parents, I was like, okay, I have my arguments ready. I have my talking points ready. Here it goes. And as my mom is just freaking out, just very upset, one of the first things she asked me was, well, are you still going to get married in a church? and I asked her, I was like, what? I didn't catch it the first time because that's not even on my mind right now. I'm not even thinking about this kind of stuff. But what matters to other people as far as the social conflicts and stuff that comes up with this kind of thing, sometimes it is a much bigger deal than it is for us, because now I'm living the life. I got a show now. I'm doing this thing.
It's like she didn't want to save you.
Yeah.
Her first thoughts were, what's this going to look like in our community if my son isn't getting married in a church?
No, more think of the wedding photos.
Yeah, and and I'm not making fun of my mom for that. I don't. You would be the one to make fun of my mother like that. But I just think it's the priorities are different for other people. Yeah. And that's the most frustrating thing, because there isn't a strong voice in news outlets and things that are saying oh, we're atheists and we're just like everybody else. Sometimes we're kind of picked on as kind of the others, and there's kind of that us versus them mentality. And God, living in Texas, I'm sure these guys can tell you, you throw a rock around here and you're going to hit a church no matter which direction you throw it, I mean, most of the people here in our country are religious, and we are unfortunately the minority in that, and we have to deal with...
That is evidently changing.
It is
the process and progress that is being made by people like you, Stan. I think it's important that I stress that, because while you've suffered yourself from these consequences, which are just unjustified and they're unfair, and as you said, it's incredibly emotionally draining. And while I haven't experienced it with atheism, I have certainly experienced it with other topics that I don't have the status quo opinion on. I just want to say that you're making it so that the next time they meet another Stan who is an atheist, it's not going to be as hard for them. And it's deliberate. It's specifically because you've taken some of that off them. And now they have to operate with this idea, okay, there's more than one Stan, there's more than one atheist, and I actually want to be friends with them still, and I really enjoy their company, and perhaps it doesn't need to be as divisive as I've been brought up to think that it must be, and perhaps I don't need to say, I'm calling off this date because he's an atheist. Right. It's really unfortunate, and I'm sorry that you're suffering from it, but
let me clarify, there's only one Stan.
Yeah, there's one Stan, and it's you, Stan. Your Stan.
Damn straight. But I thought, so, I mean, I think you guys have been given great advice. So, and to further,
I was mostly complaining. I don't think I gave actually any advice there, but thank you anyway. Yeah.
Your presence is enough. It's very comforting.
I'll take it.
But there was a third coworker at work, and I think he must have heard the whole situation. But anyway, I found out later on, he also didn't talk about his religion much, but he was also very religious. Anyway, after I left that particular job, he wanted to hang out, and he was a really good guy. And he took me around his friends, right? And apparently, he's in this a really nice church that has this big community group, and they do baseball, they got their own league and all that, right? And he said, wanted to see if I wanted to join and all that. And I met so much of his friends, and his friends were great people. I really liked them, right? But they're all very much believers. Every single one of them, very much believer. But they seem to like me, but when the subject did come up, and I just went with, oh yeah, I'm just generally not much of a believer, trying to avoid the A word because that seems to be the trigger, right? I've said non-believer in the past, and that I think people were like, I think people, when they hear that, it doesn't sound like a solid, definite stance, you know, right? So it's like I could like, oh, maybe I'm still finding myself, you know, right? So like there's room. So like people don't really put much thought into it. Like, okay, you may not be part of my club, but you know, one day he will find himself. But once you say atheist, it's like, oh yeah, this is something different.
You know what I say, Stan? I've gotten into the habit of saying I'm not a Christian. And that's weird because it's like, I don't say what I am. I just say, I'm not a Christian. I'm separating myself from the majority by doing that and saying like, I'm kind of in this other category. I've used humanist before, but most people don't know what that is, especially a secular humanist, right? And you're right, the atheist word, that kind of comes up. But I just say like, I'm not a Christian. Or I say I was a Christian. I'm a former Christian, ex-Christian, whatever you want to call that, you know. And that raises flags in a good way because that tells people a story in a way they might not have considered. Because if you say you're an atheist, well, that could mean a lot of things.
There's a lot of stigma attached to that.
That could be like one of these guys where it's like, religion was either a big or not as big part in their lives, yada, yada. But like, if I say I'm an ex-Christian, well, that tells a story of, I grew up in the church. Oh, yeah. The worship stuff. Let's go. Yeah, Bible studies, I was there for that. Wrote some of them. Like, but... You know.
It is really interesting with the word atheist because I know that I principally would just say, hey man, I'm an atheist. And whatever backlash came, I'd just go, hey, we can still be friends. You don't need to be nasty about it kind of thing. But I know the word means different things to different communities. And it's a matter in which way it's best for you to approach it. Yeah. I met one person who said, it was someone from America, and they said, so you're an atheist, right? And I said, yes. And they went, so why do you think communism works? And I was like, what? Why is that related? But to them it was. It had a different loaded connotation, if you will.
Isn't that interesting?
Exactly. I've seen this, and that like it could literally mean anything to them. In fact, it could possibly mean devil worshiper to them.
That's right. So, and just like what Stephen was saying, you being a good person and you just being like, hey, I'm an atheist and this is what I am. That's changing the narrative.
It is. You're helping destigmatize it for everyone. When people are shocked to hear that you're an atheist, that's you doing something great. That's you changing their minds about things. And you should be proud of that.
Agreed. Also, I don't tend to use atheist, I tend to use non-religious. One, because there's a semantic point to be made, and that is that Buddhists are religious and they don't believe in a god, so they're technically atheist. But two, I find non-religious is quite a good way of expressing it, because all you're saying is I don't believe in a religion. There's no non-religious forums or things like that. So it's just, you're basically
except for the faithless forum.
I guess, but non-religious, it's like, I guess so. It's like, you don't use faith. That's how you get entrance into the forum. You got to go up to the door and use your knowledge to open it. You can't use faith and walk into it. Yeah,
leave it at the door. You have to answer a riddle to get in.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a sphinx there. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's all a delicacy, my friend, and I hope that you can find the right balance with what works for you and also works towards making basically the world here, or I should say the United States.
So, it's the world. It's the world.
And to Dan's point previously, when he was talking about how he's in the South and there's so many churches, I'm deep in the Northeast, the North, which is supposed to be more secular. In case you don't know, and
they tell you
it's happening here. Yeah, but I really like Dan's idea about saying like I'm a former Christian or something like that, because it does like it's a story and invites questions, maybe they might want to find out more and maybe have their guard down. Like, okay, so he was part of my club, and there's a reason why he left. So maybe I can investigate that, and it's like not in a confrontational manner, because they'll be asking the questions, and it's not like me saying like, "Hey, I'm making a statement," which you might find offensive somehow.
I found it's worked for me. I found people are more willing to ask questions when it's appropriate. But yeah, and that's times when I feel like talking to people about it, because sometimes you just don't want to really get into it, but but Stan, great question. Thank you for calling.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Keep being Stan.
Keep being Stan. You're the only one, Stan.
I think we could all be a little more Stan.
We could be a little more Stan. Let's stand to be a bit more Stan. All right? Take care, Stan. Thanks again.
You guys are all fantastic. You guys are all doing great work, and please don't stop.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah. Stand by me. I don't know. I'm trying to think of
Oh,
puns. Can you stand the puns right now?
I've got this secret relationship with puns where it's not so secret now that I've mentioned it, but I hate them.
Oh, really?
They suck humor out of the room for me, and yet,
Oh.
Nope.
and yet,
He constantly makes
And
them.
yet, there it goes.
no, I do not make them.
Yes, you do.
Lies.
I have lived with you for the last week.
She is so good at lying. It's unreal. No, what it is
Do you want to know what
if
your favourite YouTuber is?
No, come on, you stop this business right now. Yeah, okay. We'll just finish this. Carry on, let's go. Let's go.
Oh my gosh, this is the best.
I was going to say,
I need
this is
two
like,
co-hosts on here more often. It's so great.
there's 1% of puns that are so good that they bring all the humor back into the room. And so that's where I stand on puns.
Okay.
I'm going to make a video, puns debunked.
Puns debunked. Oh my gosh.
I'm going to make a video response telling you why you're wrong.
Oh,
Freeway.
no, not
It'll be a
again.
whole thing.
It's going to be
okay.
like Alex O'Connor 2.0.
Oh, man.
Let's do this.
So I want to get to this next caller. This is Craig. He's called in before. He is a theist. And Craig, I think you maybe you had some problems with me talking about. I have the note here. It says epistemology and faith. It says what I got wrong. So I'm kind of curious to hear.
Am I live right now?
You're alive right now,
Hey,
Craig.
man.
What's up?
Pleasure to meet you.
Did they know I've hosted this show? I've actually been in
Co-hosted, Craig. Co-hosted. Don't.
Was he the host and you were his co-host?
Hey,
Woo.
it's different than you were co-hosting and I was hosting. No, he put that in my mouth. I wanted to talk a little bit about England, give them my background on England because they'll be really interested, and talk about what you guys were talking about. I guess it was the first caller, faith versus just a little bit about epistemology.
We're talking about an article,
to-
Craig. We're talking about Greg Koukl wrote an article about me. That's how we got that conversation started. Are you familiar with Greg Koukl?
I know the name.
Okay.
Vaguely. I don't know well.
Well, do your research and
Wrote
then.
an article about you personally.
Yes. Well, I'm involved in it. It's not completely about me. I'm just a pawn in the narrative. But
Hey man, you're the star.
but no, we'll have to. We'll have to talk about that later, Craig, because I thought you wanted to talk about that. But okay, go on with what your thing is. We'll hear it out.
Okay, first thing, how is Faithless Forum?
Faithless Forum is
Off the charts,
fantastic. I
Amazing.
Honestly, Craig, I wish you were there. That would be cool.
I would have gone. You know, it was a little bit. Dallas is a little bit. I live in Malibu. If it were somewhere like in Arizona, I might have gone down for the weekend and hung out. I noticed that Ocean was there. He's a
Ocean's here right now.
He's here right now. He's at the ACA.
In the crowd.
Hi, Ocean.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would have come hung out if it were a little bit closer. Okay, so England. My wife is half English, so we are practically paisan. My wife's her mom grew up in England and moved here in like late 50s from Chippenham, Wiltshire. So I've been there. I've been to the West Country. So her aunt and uncle live out in Dorset.
Oh, nice.
Love it. Love it.
Great area.
Was there a question in there somewhere, Craig? I'm just trying to follow you.
No, I was just I was just bonding with the fellow Englishmen. Like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so now the question, so you were talking about epistemology, kind of, sort of. Now I interviewed Paul. Do you guys know Paul? You all know Paul
Apologia.
here, right?
Yeah.
I know Apologia,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Greatest atheist of all time. The greatest atheist of all time.
What the heck, Craig? I got you on my show, dude. All right, never mind. We got to end this call.
The greatest. I didn't say the greatest call-in show. You have a great. I said you have a great call-in.
All right, fair enough. I'll take
Props
it.
for that.
I'll take it.
Okay, so now I was thinking about when we talk about faith, aren't we kind of like getting something wrong with why people actually believe what they believe? Like when a straight epistemologist talks to somebody, they'll say the person has never really thought about it. So they give kind of, some of them have and some of them haven't. They're either kind of trained in apologetics, so they'll give some sort of bullcrap like, here's Kalam, here's why I believe in God, because can't have something from nothing, watchmaker, this and that. So they've been sort of trained to give an answer. Or it's just a regular person who happens to be some form of a believer. They don't really think about it. So I started thinking about it with like young Paul. Paul G is now the greatest atheist of all time. But back when he was 15,
Citation.
he was a Christian. Right. Back when he was 15, he was a Christian. But the justification for his beliefs were kind of like, and I went through this he was on my channel like 2 weeks ago. We went through all this. It was really fun. It was a great conversation, actually. But the justification for his belief is actually evidence-based, but it's evidence of the community that he grows up in. Like his family is telling him, look, these things, the Bible says X, so X is true. The Bible says X, Y, Z, and then he's raised in a community of believers, and he's raised with trusted elders. And until you are given a really good reason to disbelieve them, that becomes your reality. That's really why, if you said 15-year-old Paul, why do you believe in God? If he really thought about it, that's why he believed in God, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree to that. I think when people first are going through the deconversion kind of phase and they're looking into things, they're looking at their own version of events first, right? Their own narrative, what their own denomination talks about. And I think people branch off from there. But like, you know, what's interesting is like Catholicism didn't get any more like convincing to me afterwards, or like particularly any other like none of the other Christian sects really kind of interpretations thereof of Christianity really got any more. I mean, there were some arguments here and there that were kind of cool, but what's kind of weird is even then, even in that kind of search for truth, I was more interested in other religions in general because those were kind of foreign to me, but also like. You know, like you're talking to people who more or less believe a lot of the same things about what you do. I mean, like you can talk about the semantics between a Baptist and a Methodist and all this other stuff, but like a lot of the narrative, a lot of the history, a lot of the stuff is still there. So I don't know. It's something to think about. I see what you're saying.
So yeah, I mean, Paul, if you just had...
I mean, if you... Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, okay, so Paul back then, as far as I remember, he didn't have anything that he would have described as like a mystical experience or direct like contact with God in any meaningful way as like a 15-year-old. And he never really analyzed his beliefs then. He just took what they said as the truth because that's what we all do when we're growing up. You know, what we're raised in is our truth. And then when he started finding reasons to disbelieve when he was like 25, 26, he found out some of the things they were telling him were wrong. For example, you know, I think he was raised a young Earth creationist. So he starts learning that the Earth is a lot older than 6,000 years. It kind of shatters everything about his faith. Very similar to what happened to Digital Hammurabi, raised to believe so fervently in an inerrant Bible that once they started realizing that the Bible's probably not inerrant, they couldn't keep any piece of the faith. Because it shattered everything.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. But that's interesting, Craig, because your idea of Christianity, and this was a Christianity that I held, was that a mystical experience kind of, in a way, validates your beliefs in some way, which is interesting because, again, that's just one interpretation of Christianity out of a myriad of different ones. And so I don't know about Paul. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Well, I mean, I'd love to hear Stephen analyze this and think it through. Why people actually believe, and Rachel as well, why people actually believe what they believe is a lot more complicated than what we even say to like a street epistemologist on the surface, because we don't really think about it all that deeply. You know, that's why he started posing questions to you, Dan, and a big chunk of your belief system came completely unraveled in just asking those questions, right?
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. There's a lot more to people forming their beliefs than just what is right and what is wrong. A lot of it comes from the people that they're around, like you say. A lot of it comes from the circumstances that they've been in and what they've experienced and what they've learned from other people. And when you're questioning their beliefs, you do have to kind of start to take apart all that stuff as well. The thing is, all that stuff doesn't impact what is objectively right and wrong. A person's personal experiences and what they've been taught and who's taught them doesn't change the fact that evolution happened. It doesn't change the fact that we found fossils and stuff like that. So we have to recognize the difference between objective facts and evidence and kind of personal experiences and how that influences what we believe. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
that makes 100%. That's why Paul. So Paul has enough intellectual integrity. He seconded this. He's 25, 26, and he starts realizing that some of what they taught him, however well intended, was incorrect faction.
So could we say
that's
this?
a really big problem.
He had this
What's that?
epistemology where he was trying to find out what's true. And one of the ways in which he thought was a good way of finding out what's true is to listen to your elders. And he realized
Correct.
at a later age that's actually a really terrible way to find out what's true. And because
they
of
can't
that,
be
he
trusted,
realized
that's
that any beliefs that he had that was predicated on that are themselves in jeopardy. And that's where he started seeing the cards fall, if you will.
I wouldn't say just listening to your elders is terrible, but you have to be able to critically evaluate which elders to listen to.
Yeah, but if the principle is you listen to your elders and they're correct.
Oh, and all elders. Yeah, okay, yeah, got you.
But I know what you're saying,
Yeah,
because the elders themselves,
Yeah.
they either have a solid form of epistemology.
You're older than me, and for some reason I listen to you.
I know, exactly. but I would
I'm younger
like to
than
think,
both of you, and I don't listen to any of you guys.
I'd like to think that you listen to me not because I'm older, but because I have shown again and again that I can produce objective evidence.
Did you
Objective
force me to
evidence.
listen?
Forced you to listen.
Listen
Forced
to
me to
this
listen.
guy.
Listen to this guy. There you go. When objective Dan says that I present objective evidence.
Oh my
that's
God.
when-
Objectively, Dan. Not having this discussion again.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Objective Dan says you've got objective evidence. That's like the seal of approval.
Oh, it's done then. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, get it right. Rational rules.
I need a name change.
Sorry, Oates, Rachel.
Now, Mr. Rational, one last thing. I watched your Drew episode. I like Drew, actually. Drew's been on my channel, too.
Yep.
Good guy.
About Jordan Peterson. One of the things that you said you've researched him. Have you listened to his Bible lecture series?
I fell
That was
asleep
recommended.
within about 9 hours. No, I actually
9
haven't
hours?
watched them all. I didn't get a great amount of value from it. I watched the first 1.5.
Okay.
He is very
I've also
dry. This
I-
is-
I've listened to them though, Craig. Not all of them though. I think I listened to the first two, like probably same 1.5 to 2. You know, they're very long.
They're very long. I'm
Yeah.
not particularly a fan of a lot of Jordan stuff, although I do like him in many other areas, as I made clear in the episode.
Right. Yeah. No, I thought your episode was fair for an atheist analysis of Jordan Peterson. The reason why he's quasi-revolutionary or well, potentially revolutionary is that particular approach. Not necessarily that he nails down perfectly philosophically the psychological underpinnings of the Old Testament, but the idea of reading the Old Testament to try and dig at the metaphorical truths and the symbolic truths and the psychological underlying meat of this philosophical meat of the stories as opposed to the literal truths,
Yeah,
analyzing
and
whether-
surely you would accept
is
that
that
you can do that.
revolutionary though?
Yeah, I was
Well,
gonna say
well,
Joseph,
well,
there is-
Joseph Campbell and
I
like
was going to
This
say
is-
that's
this is what I
literally
would
what my
say.
primary school did.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
no,
curious,
Joseph Campbell-
Craig. Do you think the same can be done of the Quran?
I'm sure it could. to
Okay,
some
and the
degree.
same with the Iliad?
Iliad, absolutely.
Exactly. So,
Iliad, absolutely.
one thing that...
Gita, right. Before I was a Christian, I did a lot of wide spiritual readings. Tao Te Ching, I liked a lot. Bhagavad Gita. And yeah, I've even talked about this on my channel. There are spiritual truths that, or at least, maybe if they're truth, that's debatable. You guys are atheists, so maybe you won't say they're true. But there are things in the Tao Te Ching that I found spiritually true prior to me becoming a Christian. Part of the reason why I started to become a believer intellectually.
By spiritually true, do you mean that you ascertained value from it?
Yes.
It's a really odd way to say true, but this is part of the issue that I have with Jordan Peterson.
I understand that this is a much more complicated question.
But it's funny because, we're talking about epistemology and then we want to redefine the word truth to mean valuable, and it's not useful.
it's something we've talked about with Greg before on this show.
But
It's
what
a-
what I will say is that I understand. Here's something that I can meet you halfway with. The fact of looking at
I'll take it.
Yeah, I was going to say the fact that you can look at the Bible and you can look at it a little bit deeper than perhaps some people do. In fact, than many atheists do, and that is that you can say, why is it a snake that's in the garden? And it turns out that there's actually probably a good reason for that, and that is that it's not an accident that most people have some kind of adverse effect when they see a
Primal
snake.
fear of snakes.
It is a
right.
primal fear. There is something to be said about why the snake is in the story. It's why Basilisk and the Medusa is the way she is in the Iliad and in Greek stories, etc.
I find a lot of, I think it's Bart Ehrman's books. You know, he wrote like Misquoting Jesus and stuff like that. He does a very good job of picking apart why certain things are in the Bible in that respect and like what they mean for the real world, why they were chosen in the stories, and also why sometimes there are errors between them.
Yeah.
It's very interesting stuff. Says a lot about kind of like
fascinating.
the social
and
history.
It is fascinating for sure, yeah.
Revolutionary only in this sense. I don't think that and I was talking about this too, I don't think he's some like, total prophet himself. He just happened to be, Joseph Campbell did the same thing. Joseph Campbell is pretty good. It's a little bit weaker version. And Jung did a lot of the same thing. Some of the Jung is great. 80% of it you guys would hate. You'd call it woo because it is. And then Peterson is just like kind of the latest iteration of that. And revolutionary because he's popularized it.
I think the thing with Jordan is that if he had just said, and he is at this position, if you look at enough of his points and if you delve deep enough, and I mean real deep, you'll get this answer. If he had just said that, look, there's no God, and if there was no humans, no God would exist because it's what we conceive of as a God. Jesus didn't resurrect. Adam and Eve isn't true, blah, blah, blah. He's more, to be fair, he said about Adam and Eve more so than the other things that I've just mentioned. But all he was saying is that there's value to be ascertained from these stories. Then there wouldn't have been any kind of backlash from people like me. And if he didn't say atheists are murderers or things like this. The problem is that it's like Christians used to take their stories very literally because we didn't have the science to blow them out the water. Now we have science to blow even their metaphorical interpretations out of the water. And our understanding of philosophy has got to such a standard where you're losing more and more ground. And by you, I mean Christianity, I mean religion as a whole. And it seems like the next refuge is to go into this incredibly vague and vacuous situation, which really, as far as I'm concerned as an atheist, I've won. Because the people that have the kind of positions that Jordan Peterson has are not trying to claim jurisdiction over my experience. And therefore it falls into this situation of touch wood, where I'm like, okay, you're not hurting anyone. So in a way, I actually quite like it. But as I was putting across in the video, I find it to be intellectually dishonest.
I don't see the intellectual dishonest part. I agree with what you just said, actually.
Sure.
I don't think he is an atheist. You guys take this as you will. You might disagree with this. But prior to me becoming an actual Christian, when I was like 26, 27, I was doing a lot of reading. It was a lot of the same stuff. Jung, Nietzsche, blah, blah, blah. Dao De Ching, what's his face? Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I was looking for God, and I was becoming intellectually convinced that there was a God, based a lot on what I was reading. And if you asked me at different times, I would have given you different answers on different days, just like Jordan Peterson. If you asked me when I was hungover, is there a God? I'd be like, nah, man, no way, no. No.
It happens more often than you might think.
Right. Well, that to me is that's honest. That's an organic relationship to the trans. You answer where you're at. It's not with there are very few zero-sum people. Me and you guys.
So when we're talking about God here.
No, I'm 100% yes.
I was just going to ask, Greg, if you wouldn't mind, when we're talking about how your position was changing on God, I assume your definition of God was largely the same, and that is at least a creator of the universe.
Yeah, pretty sure, yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, the problem with Jordan is that all along he didn't believe that there was a creator of the universe. And by all along, I mean with all of this stuff that I've been responding to. All along, he didn't believe there's a creator of the universe, and that's all he had to say. But he wouldn't do that, and I'm not entirely sure why, but I think it was, well, I have reasons for why I think it's why. But do you see what I mean by it's perhaps intellectually dishonest to not be more upfront with that fact?
If you think he was fronting, yes, that would be intellectually dishonest.
Sure.
I personally don't. I think it's more like me that he's just talking from where he's at, and that changes.
Well, I'll put it this way: if you're correct,
watch the video, make the video. I'll watch it.
No, I'd say it this way: that if you're correct and I'm incorrect, and that's entirely possible, of course, then yes, it wouldn't be intellectually dishonest. It would actually be the opposite. It would be intellectually honest and just saying, yeah, my mind keeps changing. But I am almost certain that that's not the case. What was the case is that he didn't believe that there's a literal God that created the universe, and that he was doing these linguistic, psychological backflips in which he could be interpreted by people much the same way that he interprets the Bible. But I'm a big fan of Jordan outside of the topic.
Outside of him being intellectually dishonest.
Yeah, and that annoys me.
Fool everybody. That's funny. So either guys want to come on my channel, you're both welcome. I'd love to have you. It's not even like this. I'll just ask you questions about being atheist. And, ask Dan. Dan's been on the channel.
That's true. I have. And I do it again, too. But right now, Craig, we got to throw you out of here because we got some other calls we got to talk to.
Thank you so much.
Wrap it up. I know. That's why I didn't go to the
Craig,
before.
always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. At some point, we need to talk more about Christian mysticism and, I know we kind of briefed on that before, but, there's not enough of those kinds of conversations. And I love that kind of stuff. Totally. You're the perfect guy to talk to. We'll do that later. We'll see you later, Craig. Okay. Thanks again for calling.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you, guys.
Also accidentally called him Craig once or twice. Sorry.
Oh. Is it different in
We say Craig.
Craig? Craig?
Instead of Craig.
Really?
Craig.
I guess, I wonder if I knew that. I guess I did. I just didn't really. I guess hearing it out loud from you guys kind of makes me think, that's interesting. Did not know that. Well, we got 3 more calls here that I want to try to get to before the end of the show here, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, of course.
Where to go from here? I want to talk to Jose in Mexico. Jose, you have called the show before, and I see you want to call again about what it would take to move the debate forward after theism. What's up, Jose?
Hi, Dan. What's up?
Hey.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, Stephen. What's up?
Hi.
Hey, Jose.
How was somebody else asked already, but how was Fateless Forum?
It was the worst event of my life. I hated it, and I'm never going back.
I loved it, except that Dan guy. He was weird.
Thomas Westbrook is giving me the biggest look right now. It was really funny. No, it was great. I loved it.
By the way, Dan, if you haven't already, you have a duty as a Texan and as somebody who grew up on the other side of the Texas border. You have a duty to take your guests to Whataburger.
That's true. Have you guys gone to Whataburger this week?
It's so odd because I want to say Whataburger.
Yeah.
And that,
we had this. Alex had this discussion too.
Yeah.
It was really funny. Yeah, we'll make that happen if
it's the only time where I'm going to say, well, I say the only time. I have to say the Americans have got it right because Whataburger sounds mental.
I think as a Yorkshire person, I could get away with
you can't say Whataburger. You have to say Whataburger.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit like how you guys say aluminum.
Aluminum.
Don't get me started on
aluminium.
I strongly disagree with you on that point.
Is that going to be the rest of the debate?
That's going to be the debate right here. Okay. How to pronounce aluminum.
I bet you also spell your grades with an A.
I do spell my grades with an A.
The correct pronunciation of aluminum.
Look, it's gray. A. You hear that? Gray.
Is it Bath or Bath?
It's Bath.
Right.
Bath.
Well, you're objectively wrong. Let's carry on.
It is Bath.
Look at this guy taking over my show. Okay, Jose, tell us more about what you actually want to call it about.
No wonder you guys had the whole 1776 thing.
It's worth it in my opinion, but go on.
Anywho, yes, I'm calling to just kind of follow up on the question I asked when Matt Dillahunty was on. To ask, since actually everybody else before me, including both the guests and the callers, brought up what I wanted to say, but I think that's great, so we don't waste any more time. So the UK is pretty much, it's not as religious as the US.
We've made this super clear.
Not a Scandinavian paradise where everybody is just like, you go to church, that's great. But, so what would it take for people, and I'm kind of asking so Latin America can cheat, and what would it take to move from where Latin America needs its own horsemen and write books about coming out to their parents, and what would it take to move to just aftercare of people who used to believe, no longer do, and they fear hell, and fighting for separation of state and church? So because this started with the Greg Koku thing, and I watched the video with Doug this week.
Yes. That's the thing. I did mention that earlier, but if you guys watch Pine Creek, Doug from Pine Creek also did a video about the Greg Kokel thing, and he used some clips of me back in the day as comparison. I was very embarrassed, but I still watched it anyway, so... Yeah,
I didn't want to say it because I don't know which names I should and shouldn't I say, because there are these 3 or 4 names criticizing the street epistemology, on and on and on and on. It's almost like they're afraid or something.
Yeah.
But what would it take to stop debating the resurrection and Catholicism was brought before? Mexico is 80-something% Catholic, but I don't know a single Catholic that says, oh yeah, the transubstantiation is what did the thing. Nobody gives a damn about that. So like, how do we move from empty tombs and flying donkeys and claims like that to just say, okay, so why do you believe that original sin is a thing? So to exploring what Stephen and others have said, that it's a deeply held belief that influences their entire way to see the world, about morality and a lawgiver and all that. So I want to filibuster, so please interrupt me.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there's a few kind of important things that need to happen, even kind of before people start questioning things for themselves. So for one, it's just destigmatizing atheism as a whole within society and making sure people know that the people who are atheists aren't big and scary. They're not miserable or angry. They're just normal people.
A Stan.
Yeah, they're Stan. Yeah.
We need like a poster in the back that just says Stan. Be like Stan.
Fucking Stan.
Can I get that on a t-shirt?
I missed most of the Stan call because I wasn't talking to the call screener.
Oh, of course. He was a good guy. That's all you need to know.
Just be a good guy. Yeah.
Be a cool dude. Yeah.
And the other thing I think...
I'm gonna watch that segment again.
Yeah.
But what would it take to move us both as our respective countries and as a global society or hemispheric society?
Yeah. I think another big thing that's needed is, again, before individuals start necessarily like thinking for themselves and making their own choices, is communities like the ACA here in Austin do an amazing job of giving people who have left their they're whooping out there, and they do an amazing job of helping people who've left their faith or like struggling or been like ostracized by their family, whatever. They give them a community and a safe place to come to.
That's right.
Normalizing places like that in Mexico and other countries, I think, is a fantastic first step. And just knowing that they're available.
My answer is a really good segue from Rachel, so I'm going to go and then Steven. But like I was going to say, the ACA is a wonderful thing. It's nothing special in the sense that none of the people here are like super mighty heroes with super strength and super intelligence. Some of us are kind of smart.
I don't know, I've seen some of them.
But like, it's made up of just normal people who just decided to get together and build a community and make something great out of it. And like the atheist experience and a lot of these call-in shows came as a result of just people trying to normalize this thing and finding community together. And Jose, I think it starts with you, dude. I think it starts with organizing, finding other people that are like you and like getting this stuff started. The ACA...
It's cliche, but it's the whole be the change you want to see thing.
This building is the result of a grassroots...
It's cliche for a reason, because it works.
Yeah, this building is the result of a grassroots movement. It's the result of people just coming together to try to figure stuff out and see what works. And you know what? I'm happy I'm here.
Yeah.
It's great. I have a new family here, and I get to talk to wonderful people. And if the people in Mexico could experience that, I think you're gonna find that it'll grow.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I started my YouTube channel because I didn't see anyone else talking about the topics that I wanted to speak to who was a young woman in the UK. So I was like, you know what, if no one else is doing it, I'll do it. And if you don't think you're seeing any young people or just people in general in Mexico who are talking about these things, then you do it.
I would also just add solid advice, and the community aspect is something I didn't even know I was missing until I got here, and it's wonderful. It's all about emancipating ourselves from ignorance. So education is incredibly important. And if you can make it so that the schools teach children how to think, not what to think, you will see massive differences in a very small amount of time.
That's a huge
Okay.
thing, yeah.
It's a mixed bag here in Mexico because, like you said, well, it's not that easy. Well, it's not that easy. It's not that common to teach children how to think instead of what to think. But for example, in Mexico, evolution, not evolution. The creationism debate isn't a thing because like 40 years ago, somebody somewhere, wrote the textbook, so they mentioned evolution, and it's great because we don't have the whole. It's bad because we don't have that much involvement in local politics where people end up rising in their respective cursus honorum towards bigger posts. But you avoid things like, for example, Dan is from Texas, and you guys have a horrible congressman, Louis. Not to get too political, but Louis Gohmert, where creationism isn't debated because it's not a thing, and I think it's also happened because Catholics, they teach their children about Genesis and Adam and Eve and all that. But as soon as they get to fourth grade, they know their children are going to learn about dinosaurs and evolution and all that. So it's not that big a deal when you have people in school boards ripping each other's throats off.
Jose, I think you have unique cultural challenges that can only truly be solved by someone who is a native of the area. Someone like me isn't going to have the expertise of the lay of the land like you. And I could visit there, I could talk to people there, I could do a whole tour there, and maybe that would help. But
all the more reason for dialogue.
Yeah. I mean, like if I could export anything, it's just take what we're doing here, copy our model, copy what these communities are like here, and try to do the same thing. And I mean, like things. It's like if you were to tell me how the ACA has grown, even since I've been here, I'd be surprised. Like, I've only been here a few years, and I've seen more and more people coming in, and this organization has been around for at least 20 years, older than that. So things can happen when people get together. Something magical might happen,
It's I think you're an example of someone who looked within, and because, for example, the topic of street epistemology is not that we're gonna go out on the street and talk to people. It's an attitude to adopt towards oneself, the way you might learn about cognitive-based therapy, and not just talk to people, but reflect upon oneself. And it's the attitudes that we must adopt.
It is an attitude.
And like Rachel said, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason to be the change that we want to see in the world.
And I think the attitude is more important than importing certain facts about we have to know this is true and this is true. Like, I think the approach, the methodology that we kind of go about learning these things is really important.
It's been there for quite a while, which is like asking questions, building a model and testing it out, and be ready to be very wrong, and be ready to admit that you're wrong, and be ready to find your way to what's right.
Absolutely. I know I've been wrong at least once, so who knows if it happens again. But Jose, we got to get some other callers. Thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you for taking my call, and make sure you take them to Whataburger, and
we'll make it happen.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if the thunder can be heard on the microphones, but it's pretty.
Thor is here.
So loud.
Somebody's trying to get us to Whataburger. That's what it's telling me, or warning us.
I do have a very quick story about Whataburger.
Yeah, go for it.
So me and Alex and my girlfriend Hannah and our friend Thomas, we walked into Whataburger or Whataburger.
To where?
Whataburger.
Water
now. I'm going for Whataburger. It's been a long day. So we walked into Whataburger, and as we walked in, it was near the conference. It was near the Faithless Forum, and we got this big cheer of people going, "Hey, welcome! You're gonna love it." And we're like, "This is amazing! This is incredible!" And we walked to the front, and we had a little look at what was to offer. And Alex is vegan. Me and Hannah are veggie. In fact, me, Hannah, and Thomas are veggie. So we looked at it, and there was nothing. So we had this really awkward situation where we had to walk out past them all.
That's true. I didn't think about that. Actually,
it was good fun.
A veggie burger?
There's just when I was looking, there was nothing there. Just zero.
Yeah,
and it was
Maybe
like
chicken.
Damn. Yeah, you would have been fine. You would have been.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
chicken.
Okay, I would have been fine then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'd have been fine. But it was hilarious. We had to like, ooh, would you look at that? We better get back now.
Yeah, I thought about that because when Alex came back to the conference at one point, he had a Whataburger cup.
Yeah.
And then it made me think, like, what did you order there? And I was like, wait, what could he have ordered?
He didn't
there?
order
Like,
anything.
yeah, I was going to say,
Just like, I love a drink.
Yeah, just got a drink there. That's really funny. So this next call, I guess, is specifically going towards you, Stephen. This is Brenda in Minnesota who wants to ask your opinion specifically on someone's criticism of natural selection. Brenda, you're on the air with us.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Having a fun time. Trying to wrap up the calls here.
Yeah, I was hoping to talk to Rationality Rules, whatever his name is. I subscribe to him. I have been for a long time, and I enjoy his content, but it's really pretty elementary, and I was hoping he would kick it up from 101 to maybe 201. And one suggestion would be to address tougher problems within the philosophy of science or just general in philosophy. And one suggestion would be to address Eugene Fodor's criticism of natural selection. And I was just wondering what he thought of that.
So I'm not aware of the criticisms that you're mentioning. What I could say is if you send it to me, I will always take a look and I will produce an adequate video if it's sufficient for me to do so. What I will say is that I've had accusations of going for low-hanging fruit ever since I started what I'm doing, and what I find is that different people have a different conception of what is a low-hanging fruit. So many people, when they watch my Jordan Peterson stuff, they go, yes, this is the stuff that we need to see. And I get plenty of people going, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. This is really easy stuff. Bring it from 101 to 202. And I just wanted to make that point across. I don't deliberately go out my way to find very easy things to go for. I tend to just go for whatever.
I don't think it's a criticism.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to have basic material.
Yeah.
In fact, you could probably do a course on basic logic. That would be good because so many people don't know that. Mm-hmm. And I think that you could introduce more difficult topics within philosophy. One of them might be what I'm suggesting, which is Fodor's criticism. Basically, Fodor criticized from an atheistic perspective natural selection because, according to his criticism, it's an example of intentional causation, intentional with an S. And that would require an episode to explain the difference between intentional and intentional with an S, right? You're familiar with that distinction?
I'm actually not. Would you mind quickly pushing that out for me?
Well, it basically would say that intentional, I'm having a hard time saying that, causation would be causation that it has, that requires, direction of a mind, or it has an intention behind it, right? So Jack and Jill go up a hill, right? Their intention is to get a pail of water, right? And then they fall down the hill, and then we construct afterwards a story about Jack and Jill going up and down the hill, and we confuse the story. The story is post hoc, but we confuse it, particularly with natural selection, as saying something about why they went up the hill, and it doesn't. Natural selection can't select for traits, and it can't be a theory of a causal theory, and therefore natural selection must be wrong.
So are you somebody who accepts this criticism? You think that natural selection is wrong?
I think what he's saying is a stronger version. He's coming from an atheistic perspective, and what he's making is an even stronger version, which is that there is full stop no. It's a very eliminativist position, in that there's no reason for things happening at all, at least as far as the natural selection goes.
So
natural selection can't select. The classic example is it doesn't select for the heart pumping blood or for the lub-lub sound that the heart makes. That's the classic example that he gives, right? That it can't, there's no way for natural selection to distinguish between ride-along traits, so hanging on traits, spandrels, as others have called it. Since there's no way for natural selection to choose between them, then it can't be selecting for the traits that we think it. We're creating our explanation post hoc.
So I have an answer.
And therefore, it's not really an explanation.
So I don't know the details of this exact theory, but from what you've just said, I think it sounds like a basic misunderstanding of what natural selection is. It's not about selecting for traits. It's not about purposely selecting these things that are going to help something survive. It's about random mutations happening, which happen to help something survive, or they happen to help something die. And over time, that affects populations as a whole. So as a very, very simple example,
that's been the response by some people, but that misunderstands as criticism, and also as the theory is formulated, it is formulated as an explanatory theory that does explain why things are selected for.
Okay.
Because many things that we have are byproducts, right, of something that may have been selected for. So while natural selection may not have selected for the byproduct, it's selected for the primary factor. And that just comes along for the ride, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're spandrels.
What I'm struggling to understand.
I would suggest you look into it, and you should get some. It wouldn't be hard to find the reading material.
Not at all. I plan to read this afterwards because it'll be very interesting, and if it constitutes a video, I will be happy to make one. But it seems so far.
There's a lot of other topics too.
Send them over, Brenda. I'm always interested in more topics for sure. But what I would say on this is, seems
just
that
kick it up a notch, dude. Kick it up.
But the thing is that to me it seems like you're saying kick it up a notch. Yeah. And what's happening is, from what I've just heard, you've pointed out some attributes that some species have, and have said that this couldn't have been a product by natural selection. And it seems that you accept that other products or other attributes are a product of natural selection. So far, am I correct?
Well, I don't think that natural selection is a valid theory.
So you don't accept natural selection at all?
Because it can't select.
This is the thing, though. The words
intentionality with an S.
No. Selection.
You can't have that.
No, this is the key thing with evolution by natural selection. It doesn't help that it has the word select, because it implies that there's a selector, right? That there's a consciousness involved. There's not. So here's an example, and it may be an example that you've confronted before.
I was going to use the moths.
The moths would be a good example. During the Black Plague, there was, or just beforehand.
It was industrialization.
Sure, if you'd like to tell it, go for it.
Oh, sorry.
No, go for it, because you seem to know it better. It would be better to run.
Okay. Yeah, the peppered moths.
So peppered moths. They're a species of moth that are a little bit black, a little bit white. They're kind of spotted on them. The trees in London before industrialization were mostly white. Buildings were mostly white. They were pale-coloured. So the moths that survived were the ones that had more white on them than black.
Yeah.
As industrialization happened, the bark on the trees darkened because of the smog, the pollution, the smoke, the buildings, the stones darkened. So the moths that survived were the ones that had more black on them than white. There was no conscious selector saying that more black moths are going to be born than white moths. But because more black moths were surviving than white moths, that means the children that were born from them moths happened to have more black on them than white. And their children happened to have more black on them than white. There was no selector other than more white moths just happening to be killed off because their surroundings were changing.
And I guess the question would be that, given that process and that very evident change from having a mixed coloured distribution to predominantly black, who did the selecting? Because there is no selector.
Yeah, so there was a selection of white peppered moths, right? But there was no selection for white peppered moths.
No, but the white peppered moths very nearly went extinct while the black pepper moths proliferated. So there was, as natural selection would say, nature selected for those with that colour, basically that colour will survive.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is just because of the environment that they lived in. But the critical role here, or a critical point to be made clear, is that yes, nature selected for it, but by select, we don't mean it in the colloquial sense where we say that you make a choice. No one made a choice. There is no choice. Nature doesn't make a choice. It's just that's what happened under the rubric of nature at that time, right?
Imagine you've got like a series of runners in a race, and you have a series of racers, and the top 8 from each race go on to the next race, and then the top one's go on to the next race, and the top one's go on to the next race. Technically, you're selecting the best from each group and putting them forward every time, but no one is consciously coming and saying, I want that one, and that one. It's just the best ones survive to the next round. Does that make sense?
No, I understand. I understand. It's just that it's a selection of traits. It's not a selection for traits.
What's the difference?
Because for is a post hoc narrative that you've created.
Okay, no, I kind of see what you're getting at here, yeah. There's no one consciously saying we need more white moths, or there's no thing consciously saying we need more white moths. It's just...
Right.
Yeah, no, actually, I do agree with you. I get what you're saying now, yeah.
But it's still natural selection.
Yeah,
it's just
it is.
The point that you're making, which I think is fair, of course, is that most people view it and use perhaps the wrong language, but the result is the same. It's that nature has resulted with a complex divergence or a situation that didn't require an intellect to be behind it.
It's like we can look back afterwards and give explanations for what happened and say, oh, well, this happened because, of these circumstances and you know, these survived. So we can look back and understand it, but sorry, Steve.
No, you're right. It's like if the criticism that's been offered by Jerry is basically that there's a semantic issue and that we need to speak about this topic differently, would that be fairly accurate for what his criticism is?
Yeah.
So basically, he accepts natural selection. It's just he thinks that we are semantically dealing with it in the wrong situation. It's not very helpful.
Okay. And then we could just go on to other topics too, like arguments against physicalism or naturalism.
Well, we could go into those other topics, but unfortunately, we do have one last caller that we want to get to before the other show. We're kind of running a little bit late, but
that would have been an interesting talk.
It would have been interesting.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, thank you for calling about this. I really do appreciate it. And
very much.
Steven says, message him. Sounds like he wants to get into it more, but thanks again for calling, Brenda.
But I will say, just as a final one, that is that if I did make a video in which I discussed this and I said, yep, here's a big conversation to be had about natural selection, and it is entirely about the semantics.
Yeah.
I am definitely I'm definitely going to get people say to me, this is 101.
I think there is something to say because people assume things happen in evolution in particular ways because they provide some sort of convenience, but like that may not actually be the case historically. And I'm trying to think of some good examples.
I think there's definitely an issue in how we talk about it colloquially. Like it's very easy to say, these animals evolved to do this or they evolved to do this. And technically they didn't evolve to do that. They evolved and they can do that because of these reasons.
Hang on,
do you know what I mean?
No, slightly walk me through it. Maybe I'm being a little obtuse here. So you have...
So I would say I went to the shop to buy bread.
Yeah.
Whereas animals went to the shop and bought bread because they were hungry.
But if they're doing something, so for example, whales can breathe underwater for an incredibly long time,
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it be okay to say they evolved to live for an incredibly long time underwater?
Colloquially, we can, but there wasn't a conscious effort to say...
I don't understand why that implicitly... What am I missing? Why does that implicitly...
So there was no choice made to have longer legs or bigger
just saying
lungs
that they
or
evolved
whatever.
for this. I don't understand how I'm saying that they deliberately chose to evolve for this. But I'm just saying.
I personally don't have an issue with it. But I just think some people would. Because saying evolved to or they evolved for kind of implies some kind of purpose, maybe.
Fight.
I can see where you're coming from. It's an interesting one. And
it is.
We cannot keep Dan here forever.
I know.
So we can have
Sorry,
this
Dan.
Yes.
It's just the disagreement.
You really want a beer, don't you?
I'm not used to the disagreements being so posh and so like,
Sorry.
It's fantastic stuff. We do have one more call here that we want to get to, and then we're going to wrap things up here. This is Jason in California who wants to know about the origin of objective truth. I know you've been waiting on the line a long time, Jason, so here you are. What's up?
Hey, what's going on, brother?
It's going good. It's going good. Tell me more about what you want to ask us.
Okay, what do you guys think about objective truth. And I know Dan's name is ObjectivelyDan. So I was just wondering what your take on the origin or how objective truth came about at all, or the ability to know anything, epistemological views. How do we
You know this, right?
even talk about it?
Okay. This means I don't go first. So whoever puts the other nose. Okay, now there you go. All right.
It's me.
No, you've definitely got this, Steve.
Basically, objective truth is when people say that...
Disclaimer, we might disagree on this, by the way. But
Yeah,
we'll go for it.
this is true.
Yeah.
It seems that objective truth is when people were saying that they know something for sure. And it's changed over time because, as we were speaking about earlier in the episode and about epistemology, it turns out that we know pretty much nothing for sure. We only know it to a very high standard. And so it depends on the person that you're speaking with. And what they're basically trying to say is that they have knowledge and evidence and objective, verifiable, scientific reason to believe that something is true or that something has occurred. That's basically what objective truth is. And the way that you distinguish it from, if you will, an opinion is basically that you can demonstrate it. So that is what I would say. I don't know if you two would disagree.
I guess we've kind of spoken about this, like, we spoke about this on plane, didn't we? About kind of like spheres of knowledge and how, like, if you take everything in the universe that we could possibly know, or even outside the universe that we could possibly know, we can't know everything and we can't know anything for sure. I think we kind of agreed on. But then within that, we do have other spheres of knowledge where we accept certain laws and we can kind of figure things out based on that. And to some extent, you could call them objective truths because they're repeatable and they're based on laws that we know and understand and can predict will continue to happen.
So if we know, so basically what you're saying is knowledge only really exists based on another presupposed axiom or something or other, which, of course, when we come to God is absolutely not based on any understanding that we would ever have. So
it depends on your God.
Yeah, it depends on the God, and it depends on what you. Really.
The singularity before the beginning of the universe of the space-time continuum, basically.
Should we just call it a singularity then instead of God?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
That is his nature. Would be
why he?
Okay, he. I'm Christian, and we use he because
but
not because of his gender, but because of he represents an authoritative figure. It's kind of like a father. That's why we.
It's not just this.
Are you saying women can't be authoritative?
It's more that you're talking about the beginning of the universe here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you use terms like he, implicit in that is that you know it's an entity, an agent.
Okay.
That it has.
Can you let me by with the explanation that it's an authoritative figure that we liken to a father or okay?
Yeah,
so
sure.
Maybe okay. Let's say the creator. How about that? So the singularity before the space-time continuum. He can't be bound by the space-time continuum if he created the space-time continuum.
What if he's bound by another space-time continuum outside of the space-time continuum? Maybe there's other.
Well, dimensions. He can't.
I don't know.
He can't because
why not?
If he so if he created the space-time continuum, it's because he was going from a singularity to a plurality. So you need space.
What? Wait. Why does? Okay. Wait. Let's slow down here because there's still some assumptions being made, right? He could be outside the space-time continuum, and he didn't have to create it. He could have nothing to do with it.
Well, when you say
another
outside,
thing is when you say space-time, are you saying that time began to exist at the beginning?
Well, when you say outside, you're basing your understanding of it on space already.
Yeah, you can't be outside of space. You can't do something before time.
Right, because that is spatial. So no, he is beyond space and time, which of course many believe that space is time. So to go from the singularity to a plurality, you need another place in space to put that other creation.
How do you know that?
So that's what space is. Well, space and time, you need somewhere to put it and some time to
But if there is no space and there's no place to put it?
I mean, also you're assuming a certain bit of logic, like you're assuming that there's.
And you're also saying that he started something. He cannot start something unless he's under the rubric of some kind of time constraint.
So I guess to wrap this all up though, Jason, like
and you can't say he because you
to put the general, I think, criticism is you're always going to be making assumptions, and like we're not saying that we don't make any assumptions in our worldview, but we might differ on some of those assumptions. We may have better reasons for holding the assumptions that we do.
Also, can we work backwards like we do with basically every other claim? And that is that we observe the evidence and then we get to the claim that we're trying to recognize, rather than starting with God exists, that he's a he, and then trying to see how it functions.
Your evidence is derived from the creation. So you can't go before the beginning, because that is the beginning of the time.
Well, here's something that we don't know. We don't know that everything began at the Big Bang. We literally don't know that.
What we do know is physics and the space-time continuum.
No, we don't actually. All we know is that our theories break down there. So let me give you a little small story to explain what I'm saying.
There's no more science that can be done because science is based off of physics as we know it.
Yeah, but we don't know that physics starts there. In fact, most people don't think that physics starts there.
Actually, just because our current knowledge of science stops there doesn't mean we have to fill it in with God.
And also,
because anything before that, there would be no time or space or matter for anything physical to occur.
It didn't stop God from happening. I mean, like if we're just
God is beyond your plural understanding. He's a singularity which we cannot understand.
But the thing is I can fill in your God.
For him.
Yeah, it's just the thing is that anyone can play this game for one, and two, your assumptions are incorrect. So hang on one sec.
For example, my current knowledge doesn't tell me what's behind that wall. Therefore, it must be a pink unicorn.
No, but you can deduce that there is something behind that wall because of space-time continuum.
Can you?
Could
it not be nothing?
What I'm saying is we get to an X factor where there is no physical understanding or science that can bring us past the point of space-time continuum, the beginning of the space-time continuum, because you can't have an eternal amount of time.
If I can...
That's why I don't know why you think there's God. Like, out of all the things, why did you pick God? Because you're telling us you're telling us yourself that you don't know. We can't know outside of our science. So why are you telling us that this has to be the thing?
And to put to cross the T on what you're saying there, to say we don't know, therefore God, is definitionally an argument from ignorance.
So what I'm saying is you can't know, not you don't know. You cannot.
We can't know.
It's paradox to go before.
Period. We can't know.
It's paradox.
You don't get to say we can't know, therefore God. It's just we can't know. If you're going to do that, and also that's not justified because perhaps we can't know. The situation we find ourselves in at the moment, because there's two fronts that I'd like to tackle this from, and I don't mind either of which. But the first is that we don't know that the universe began to exist at the Big Bang. And in fact, most of our theories indicate that it actually didn't. The Big Bang is, when we talk about the Big Bang, we're talking about a moment in time, not the beginning of the universe. We have no reason to believe that the second law of thermodynamics doesn't work at that point. All we know is that our theories break down at that point.
And the space-time continuum, a continuum needs all three of those components need to come into existence at once, because none of them can exist without the other. You can't have matter without space, because you won't have anywhere to put it, or a time to put it.
This is the thing.
Continuum. You cannot have space without time. Therefore, they were created at once.
Can't you have space without matter, though?
No, you cannot, because there would be no distance between anything to be relatively distinguishable.
The thing is, the theory as to why we think the universe began to exist at the Big Bang is based on Einstein's general relativity. But the problem is that we know...
and guess what?
Hang on, Jason, hang on. We know that Einstein's theory of general relativity does not work when applied to the super small, such as quantum mechanics, because it's not compatible, and to the super large. So we're in this state where we look at the Big Bang and we have to say, we don't know. We don't know whether or not things began to exist there, whether or not time manifests in a different way. We genuinely don't know. This is what our astronomers and physicists say. And that's the situation we're in. But here's my point. after making that as clear as I possibly can, the answer is we don't know. So I'm not granting your assumption, but I will do tentatively. Let's assume now that we did know that the universe began to exist at that point. Why are you assuming that the Christian God, I assume, is correct?
I would hate to. Okay, so if we can assume that, I'd hate to be a broken record, but of course this is the best cosmological argument in my understanding. And
so the Kalam cosmological argument. Let's say that I accept it, yeah, and it goes as follows. Or if you'd like to give it, it's up to you. But it's essentially that whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. That tells you nothing about whether or not that cause still exists. It tells you nothing about whether or not it's an agent or whether or not it's not an agent.
If it's timeless, it can't not exist ever, because if it ever existed, there is no amount of time that could bind it or destroy it.
No, this is the thing. There could be rules and regulations and situations that manifest in a way that are not remotely conceivable to us. So we can't make. Can be. Sorry?
Physically, scientifically speaking, because science is based on
physics. But science doesn't work in a situation where the rules of science don't work. Yeah. So why are you claiming to have knowledge about things where we don't even understand how the rules are played?
So, right, I completely understand what you're saying now, this is where I wanted to be. So Occam's razor, after we can say we cannot know, you have to use Occam's razor, you're left with the creator.
No, you're not. Occam's razor is we don't know.
But I'm saying if we assume that there was a beginning in time, that means there's a beginning of space, time, and matter, because it's a continuum. So matter being energy. So
not necessarily, but even if there was,
equals MC squared, right?
Even if everything began at a single moment, why do you think that Occam's razor makes it so that we should assume that there was an intelligent creator?
Well, just like Dylan Hunt, your buddy Dilly Hunt says, it's either pixies, it could be, but pixie. The whole pixie theory is completely. It's not using Occam's razor at all. That's again based on many different actions.
And the Hebrew God of Israel is? I don't understand.
Yeah. What about Zeus?
Well, his manifestation into the Hebrew culture, that's a completely different understanding. But what I was getting to is if we can determine that there is a beginning of time, then if we could determine whether there's paradox, which you do believe in paradox and square circles and things that are not true, then that
did we say that? I don't. Did we assume that to be true about us? I don't know if we ever said that.
Well, there's paradox. So are there square circles?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Can God create something so that
paradox is more like you have to spend money to make money. A paradox is basically it's something that seemingly seems like it doesn't make sense, but it actually does. It's not something that defies logic.
So, are there things? Do you believe in anything that is untrue? Because if you can believe in something that is untrue, that is in turn you're saying you believe in something that is true.
What?
Yeah, I lost that one.
I think, and to answer your question, of course there's things I believe that are probably untrue, but the reason is because I haven't sufficiently thought about them.
Okay, so if there's something that is untrue, that therefore, given that means that there is something that is true. It's ontological inference, but...
It's just I could be right or wrong about the assumption that I hold or the belief that I have, right? Like everybody else, including you, about this situation.
Right, so... Basically, what I'm getting at is if we can believe, okay, and I know you don't have to assume everything, but if we can get there, it'd be easy. But so if we can,
I don't know, Jason. We're kind of running out of time here, but maybe if you could kind of wrap things up and we can.
I'll wrap it up. If we can account for a beginning in time, an agent that began, which is outside of space-time continuum, and then it's pretty easy to find which God it is because first of all, it'd have to be a popular, singular monotheistic God, which is by definition the most high.
I still don't see why it has to be an agent that causes it.
Oh, so why singular?
Also, why
an
Christianity?
Singularity.
The thing is, it's like if you grant these assumptions, yes, of course we get to your belief because we're granting the conclusion.
Yeah. That's like three assumptions just right there that you gave us, and that's not even including all the other stuff.
Exactly. It's like you're asking us to assume what you're trying to prove.
An An agent is a singularity outside of space-time continuum that has free will or libertarian freedom to create, because before creation there can't be determinism. So
that's why I can't get behind that assumption.
Oh,
well,
okay.
You can't take a determinist view before.
Hold on, we're getting an interruption here. Is there an Ocean in the building? Ocean, hello.
Yo, I've been listening to this call, and I find a certain amount of entertainment in it. Hey, Jason, are you still there, my dude?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so I'm a polytheist, and I have a couple of objections to what you're saying. One of the issues, mainly with the idea of a pre-Big Bang deity, is going to be that you're not going to have temporal states. So you have a God that is deciding to create the universe outside of time. So you're going to need to provide a mechanism that explains temporal states somehow. How is this God actually deciding to start the universe?
Well, no, that would actually be the whole point, because algebraically speaking, if I can determine that A, or let's say X, is, if we only have 10 answers and I know it's not 9, not necessarily can I find the answer, but I can find the 9 that it isn't. And then that algebraically would mean that there's only one option. So
we have not an agent. We have not an agent currently. So if you're going to be giving...
Well, we're talking singularity. You're a polytheist. So
yeah,
we're talking singularity or plurality.
Let's say it's... Okay. First, you would need to give me some kind of reason why it can't be more than one agent or more than one deity. As soon as you solve this idea of agency, you're going to start to get into another problem, which is that it could be more than one, and that's not going to work out for you as a monotheist. That's a terrible situation.
I've just realized something quite incredible that I hadn't considered before, and that is that when I come to this situation with the Kalam cosmological argument, and I have to have this argument about how have you proven it's one and not many, or whatever, or none, I can just send them to a polytheist, because you're doing this for me, Ocean. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, because the number zero, okay, nothing comes from nothing. So what I'm saying is, if we have the agent, it can't be a plural, because every number comes from one, because you can eternally divide one into eternity. So you need one to create a plurality.
So you're saying that algebraically, because you can divide one, therefore God created the universe? That doesn't make any sense.
Basically, we can account for a singularity because we have a plurality. So a singularity wouldn't need a space or time.
Let's agree for a second, because I think this argument is dumb. But let's agree for a second that you have one thing that creates the universe. Why does it need to be an agent, especially considering the situation where you can't have something that has temporal states? You need time in order to have temporal states.
You need
God has to make the decision.
Time or space.
The God has to make the decision to create. If he can't make the decision to create,
exactly
because there's no temporal states.
Oh my gosh! So a plurality
otherwise it's not an agent.
Time. So a plurality needs space and time, because you need a distance between the singulars that create the plurality. A singularity does not need space or time. Also, if we're talking about the beginning of the space-time continuum, it has to be unbound by space and time and matter, because it's continuous.
Right, but as soon as you're unbound by space and time, you don't have temporal states, you can't make a decision to create anymore. How are you addressing that problem?
So now you're speaking of you just broke down determinism. So yes, you need
determinism or not. If you're going to be saying that if you're going to be positing this as an agent, the reason why you're positing it as an agent is because the agent is the creator. Or if you're just saying singularity, now I can posit chaos and say that no, it's actually this polytheist idea that is not an agent.
You need a plurality to have chaos.
No, I don't. Chaos would be a singularity.
You need opposing factors to create a chaos. Opposing being plural. Singularity is where the space-time continuum had to begin.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going.
It is a plurality.
But why do you believe in the Trinity then?
The Trinity is one manifested in. Yes, exactly. It's exactly.
So Jesus is not separate from the Father then?
Yes, he is. But my body is separate from my mind.
So it's not a plurality?
So I am a singularity. My consciousness and my being, I am a single person. But I have a flesh, I have a mind, and I have a soul.
That's partialism. That's a heresy. You need to take that up with the church. That's a heretical version of the Trinity.
I'm not modalist. I'm not a modalist.
No, you're partialist.
By the way,
partialism. You're saying that they make up God together.
No, I'm not. No. I promise you that is just the best example I can give, which I was about to say.
You're not saying, wait, you just said that there's a mind and a body and flesh and all that stuff.
No, that's me. I said I was giving an example.
Okay,
all
right.
I can't explain the Trinity.
Ocean, I need you on speed dial. You can just run my show for me, man. This is great.
This is the best version of Jerry Springer I've ever seen.
Well, hey, I'm glad you guys are entertained. But I appreciate you guys are smart. I don't think it's a dumb argument at all. I think you got a lot of good ideas. But I've
provided probably about 6 objections over the course of about a few minutes. And you haven't addressed any of them.
Every single one was completely obliterated by the singularity. Because you're presupposing.
Yeah, a singularity that's not conscious.
Yeah, this is
singularly
the most crazy thing I've ever heard.
Hold on, let me give you the description of chaos in the Hellenistic idea of it is that it is a non-conscious, primordial, random action. A randomness from the primordial. It is that from which all things come. So that is what best fits your definition of a singularity, is the Greek polytheist idea of the creator, which is a non-agent randomness, not
so to have
what
chaos,
you're
you have to
positing,
have more
which
than
needs to have an agency.
So
you're positing an agency.
You need more than one decision. You need
you just need to be able to posit randomness. You need to be able to have randomness and chaos.
I need to deposit randomness into this conversation because I think we're about out of time. But Jason, Ocean, thank you both for coming on.
Absolutely.
That was singularly one of the most entertaining things I've ever seen in this entire run of the program. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. Thanks again. Let's not do this again, actually. But Jason, if you want to talk about this poor man,
do ring up again, Jason. It was a good conversation.
Yeah.
And with more time, it would have been better to get real down into the dirty.
I appreciate you guys so much.
And thank you, Ocean. Appreciate it.
Honestly, objectively, Dan, you're great, man. I love how you go at these things. You got great mannerisms, and I think it's really good.
Lovely. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your show, by the way. Yeah.
I appreciate you for calling it, Jason. Thanks so much. And Ocean, get off the line, man. Come back. You need a drink after this too. I think.
Come have a beer, Ocean.
Yeah.
They just handed me one. In fact, you know what I do? I'll just.
Fantastic.
We'll do. Hold on a minute.
Oh God.
Ocean.
You're off the phone, right? All right. Cool. There he is. You're not on camera yet. You need to come over here.
All right, here we go. And then I'll just reach in and give you guys a cheers.
There we go.
Thanks, Ocean.
That was fun.
Okay, well, we are so past time. It's not even funny. We need to.
Keep getting on this.
Oh God, we're taking a selfie.
Okay.
Why not? Just why not?
It's not air. Whatever.
Yeah.
Cheers up and cheers.
This is chaos. Yeah.
Can I ask? Does this happen every show?
I have lost complete control of my life and everything that's happening.
Are we just causing chaos here?
This is chaos. You have supplemented chaos.
Yep.
Oh, Jamie wants one now.
Now Jamie wants one too.
What's going on?
The audio listeners are going to be so confused.
Yeah, they're going to be like, what's going on?
They're just going to have to subscribe to your YouTube channel.
Do the audio and the video, like and subscribe.
Jesus.
I'm in charge of stuff.
Yeah. All right. This is the weirdest episode of Truth Wanted I've ever had, but I welcome it. This was really great. So,
Did someone just bring some Bibles in?
What is going on?
This has got very entertaining.
Science cannot explain what is happening here.
No.
We are outside the laws of the physics.
Therefore, Vishnu exists.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. Okay, seriously though, we got to wrap things up. Guys, thank you so much for being on. This was
objectively fun.
Thank you. Gosh. If I had a nickel. Okay, so I gotta plug my stuff here. This is there's the people in the back that help make this show. Those of you who are watching this live on the camera. Jeez, I need more of this drink here. Hang on one second. Okay, I am Your host, Objectively Dan. This is Truth Wanted. We do this every week at 7. It's not going to be these guys next time, but it's going to be some other crazy people. Have some fun with me. You can check me out here on this YouTube channel. You can follow me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. We also have a Facebook page for Truth Wanted. And if you're feeling kind and generous, you can donate to the show on Patreon. I do not receive any of that money. All of that money goes to the ACA to help make this show better. In theory, I suppose, and all the other things at the ACA. Where can people find you guys at?
I am on YouTube at Rachel Oates and on Instagram and Twitter at Rachel Oates, but with a 0 instead of an O because I'm annoying.
Ah.
There you go.
Fantastic.
Wow. You can catch me on YouTube. I run the YouTube channel Rationality Rules, and I don't think there's anything much else to say. Other than,
That's great.
Come and check us out.
If you want to contact me, I'm on the Discord. I'm on the Atheist Community of Austin Discord. I hang out there sometimes. Also, I have an email address. It's truth@atheist-community.org, where you can send stuff to me. I look at everything that comes in. I don't always get to it right away, but I always look at it eventually, so definitely check me out there. And, anything else you guys want to say before we...
Like we find this little guy.
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of cool.
I think I'd like to just
Get
say...
him on
thanks for
Twitter.
us.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
guys,
Dan.
for
It's been
having me.
amazing.
Oh, I love it. We need to do this again sometime.
Yeah,
Maybe
we
not
will.
all that, but like something. Maybe all that again, actually. That'd be
And
cool.
thank you to all the callers. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yes.
I really enjoyed
Thank
it.
you again
Thank
to
you.
all the callers and all the patrons that help make this show happen. I've been your host, Objectively Dan, and this has been another episode of Truth Wanted. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and we'll see you next time.